Hello, everybody. I'm very much delighted to have you back with us today. And today we will be having very interesting guest lectures with us. So I will be only taking the role of moderator today. As I said, I'm very much delighted having you with us, and I will try to share my screen with you just to recap once again what we have been doing last time and what is the agenda for today. I hope you can see my screen. We are still dealing with sustainable mobility in metropolitan regions. Last time we have started with three bullet points. The first one was that we have introduced ourselves, University of Duisburg-Essen, Center for Logistics and Traffic, and our host, Columbia University. Basically, we should be right now in New York, but unfortunately, given to COVID restrictions, we are not allowed to travel, as well as Columbia University was not allowed to host this kind of big, large events. Therefore, it's a pity, but we hope very much that this is only the very start of the collaboration, and that starting from next year, we will use our chance to be there. So yeah, we have given you an overview of what our research focus areas are, but also the teaching areas, so that you get a little bit appetite to probably study with us. Then we have started with a background and motivation. Why are we so much interested in the topic? The background is just to recap, is that the humans as dominant force in the Anthropocene are changing our biophysical living conditions on the Earth. And that is being done with surely climate change, urbanization trends, demographic changes, resource overconsumption, as well as the consumption shifts. And taking this background, we are very much motivated to lead the momentum of change on transformation pathways within communities, cities, companies, NGOs, to balance the need for healthy society with stewardship of natural ecosystems. And this is being done while focusing on different sectors and as well as on their interactions. We have also talked about the continuity of the summer schools within the concepts of emerging concepts of logistics. We have named it ECOL. It is being coordinated by my colleague Dilek. Hi, Dilek. By the way, by the end of the winter school, all of you should tell her full name, Dilek Koilolu Alabash. Start learning, otherwise she will get very angry. But still, yeah, okay. So we started the summer school, the first series in 2015, with the topic on resilient urban industrial systems. It was held in Istanbul, and our host was Koç University. Then we hosted the other two ones, Port of the Futures, with 6 days in Duisburg, because as you know, Duisburg is the largest in harbor of the Europe. And then we went into the specific topics of food supply chains, again hosted with Duisburg. And last but not least, now we are doing the Sustainable Urban Mobility Winter School. It's winter school, actually was supposed to be summer school, with 7 days online, and aside with 45 participants, and our host university is Columbia University. Okay, so we are here today, and what we have done last time, we have started to frame the setting of the winter school. We talked about the transformation pathways towards sustainability and smartness, and we have started to work on our very last mile, I would say, result objective, which is then to come up with a cross-country comparison of the current state of urban mobility and logistics in order to path the future avenues. That's why I have given you some questions, which we will start working after the inputs of the speakers on. The first part, the frame setting, we have talked about basically our 4 sessions, which we are going to be concentrated on: global supply chains and urban transport systems, with sustainable governance in innovative transportation systems. The second point, or the second session, urban mobility and logistics, is going to be best and worst practices to transform urban mobility systems. So there we will be thinking of urban planning and holistic concepts. The third one will be based on business model innovation in transport and mobility. Last but not least, we will come up with technical solutions to transform transportation mobility sector towards more sustainable solutions. And we will talk about smart cities, digital innovations, and so on. Okay, so we are starting, or I would say, first session, which is the subject-oriented session. The first one was only kickoff and giving you some kind of appetite about what we are dealing with. And today we have a very exciting program. By the way, here once again a little bit pictures. Me, you know me. I haven't written my name, that's why. Here, our co-host or host is Jackie. I'm not sure whether she is at this moment here because she was facing some troubles from Kenya. At this moment, she's there. Yeah, she is the director of the Center for Sustainable Urban Development Earth Institute in Columbia University. And today we will have basically 3 sessions. The first one has already started from 2 to 3 p.m. We have Stefan with us. I will introduce him in a moment. Then we will go to EcoLogistics systems of ICLEI with Yixian Shang. Then we are going to have some input about the trends and future of the logistics systems with Ms. Frauke Eisenmann, who is also advisory board member of the Center of Logistics and Traffic. After her input, we will dive into the Port of the Future, and here we have Development Center for Ship Technology and Transport Systems with Cyril Alias, and then we will have the Port of Duisburg with very interesting input on the role of the ports in a rapidly changing environment with Alexander Garber, who has just been appointed to lead the sustainability transformation process. And then from ship, we will go to railway. And here we have the CFO of DB Cargo, Martina Niemann, who will talk about CO2 neutral logistics, growth potential for rail freight transport. Afterwards, we will go into the group works and probably to a virtual tour. Once again, our colleagues, Frauke Lolo Alabash, Dilek, Gohar, and Fabian, who will be in charge for technical support. And by the way, I will be here as well. If you have any questions, just write in the chat. I will take these questions and moderate the session of discussion. Good. Then it is my pleasure to start with Stefan Spindler. And yeah, who is Stefan? I will introduce Stefan. It's my great pleasure. He's a professor in logistics management at WHU, Otto Beisheim School of Management. He's director of the Kühnel Institute of Logistics Management and the director of Center of Digitization at WHU. He teaches logistics and supply chain management, real options analysis, and data analytics with focus on prediction improvement based on machine learning, as well as in supply chain risk management, collaborating with major consumer goods and automotive companies. In 2003, he was awarded the Management Science Strategic Innovation Prize from the European Association of Operation Research Societies, EUROMA called, and the Best Dissertation Award from the German Operation Research Society. He was given the Best Paper Award at the 53rd Hawaii International Conference on System Sciences 2020 for a paper on delay prediction for container ship based on machine learning. Stefan has been acting as a lecturer at the Wharton School of Business, University of Pennsylvania, and MIT, where he taught in the MBA and PhD programs in operation management. So he is absolutely the right person to start the first session of our first winter school part. So Stefan, you have the word. Would you like to share your own slides, or I have them?
Yeah, that would be preferred. Annie, thanks very much for the introduction. I'm very pleased to be here with you. Given this kind of international group, I think that's one of the fascinating things of being in academia and talking about global issues, that you really get to talk to people from across the globe, and I think that's very interesting to have your perspectives. Annie and I, we have cooperated on a number of projects, and we just finished kind of the application for an exciting EU project, which hopefully is going to materialize next year. So keep the fingers crossed. All right, let me share my screen, and then we're ready to go. Okay, can you all see my screen? Awesome. Then
yes,
yeah, so I will be talking for the next, I guess, well, 15 to 20 minutes, and then we have a discussion. If you guys have any questions in between, just jump in. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about the greening the urban last mile, and why we're talking about that. Well, first of all, the urban population is on the rise, right? So you can see this on the chart. For the first time, roughly in 2008, there was an equal share of population living in rural areas and living in urban areas. And nowadays, this has shifted towards a greater share of the global population living in cities, right? I mean, this does depend on the region that we look at, but when we look at it globally, there's a lot of urban population, and that's why looking at urban systems makes a lot of sense. Then why the last mile? Why worry about transportation? Well, you all know that e-commerce has picked up tremendously, not only since COVID, but certainly again fueled by COVID and the inavailability of stationary shops and stuff like that, right? And with that, there come a couple of challenges. I will not go into too much detail about them, but let that be the setting, right? So we see more and more urban population, we see an uptake of e-commerce, and we have to find solutions in order to make sure that the urban area is an area of economic activity, of economic growth on the one hand, but on the other hand, also a sustainable solution, right? And that leads me to the agenda. I will quickly set the stage in terms of what does the urban infrastructure nowadays look like, or what can it look like? And then I will look at some of the interventions that are possible in terms of making urban last mile more eco-efficient. And last but not least, I want to point out to some research opportunities for you guys. If you're interested in those topics, what could be themes that you might be considering? All right, so what we see in terms of urban development, so this is not yet focused on urban transportation or urban mobility, but really only urban infrastructure, is that we tend to move from a car-oriented city. That was like the paradigm for the 20th century, right? Everything was built in order to accommodate the car. We move away from a car-oriented city towards a sustainable mobility city, and then even further towards the city of places, right? That's a trend going on. Not everywhere has this movement taken place yet, right? So for instance, in the United States, there's still a lot of cities that are very clearly car-oriented. In other areas, like in Europe, in some places, in Asia and elsewhere, you do find already city of places, right? So you should think of many urban areas being somewhere in those three stages, right? But there's a clear trend towards more and more going towards the city of places, okay? And typically this is what we observe over time. And just to give you an impression what that can look like, this shift from car-oriented to place This would be an example of from London, for instance, right, where here there's a roundabout, and very clearly the human element has not been properly taken care of. While down here you can see this nicely. This is a park where there's recreational activities, economic activities, and so forth. Right, so there's a clear shift as we move from C to P. Right, and you can see this in other cities as well. I urge you to take a look at this gallery. It's very interesting to see for all kinds of regions and cities how this has shifted. And you see it doesn't take long, right? If you look at Paris, it's just 5 years from really ugly and not accessible at all, other than the car, to much nicer looking, much more accommodating. And there's a number of triggers. I'm not going to go into detail. Annie is going to give you the slides afterwards, such that you can take a look at it a little more closely. Right. So that's the first thing I would like to state, that there is a transition going on from totally car-oriented to less car-oriented, more kind of people-oriented or place-oriented. Right. That's the one thing. And then there's a so-called sustainable urban logistics planning framework that has been developed in academia together with various government bodies, and that is commonly known as the SOAP. And here you see the steps, and we don't have the time to go through them. Just to give you one example, in the very first stage of such a transition or of such planning activities, you have to think about who are the stakeholders, right? Who should be engaged? Who should sit on the table in order to make this shift happen? And you see there's a number of stakeholders here, right? So it's citizens, local authorities, retailers, third-party logistics providers, and so forth, right? In other words, to make this successful, make sure that you have those stakeholders assembled, right? And then just to give you one example of Burgos from Spain, they see an area that was meant to be more kind of a passenger accessible, and here you see some of the strategies that have been outlined again as the very first step for such a sustainable urban logistics planning process. Okay, now let's take a look at what can be done to green the urban last mile. Right, and there's a study that was undertaken by the World Economic Forum that had been published there last year, that essentially first of all looked at why is there such a demand for the urban last mile. I had already mentioned one aspect, namely e-commerce. Right, we saw that there's more and more people living in cities, and that goes hand in hand with a congestion increase. Right, I mean, for those of you who do live in big cities, I think that's a common thing that bothers us, the time waste of being in congestion, plus of course all the emissions that arise. Then there's a rise in customers who are willing to buy online, right? And that differs by region, right? So I learned from our Chinese students, for instance, that they're very willing to buy groceries online. Like typically in a class, if I asked, then 80 to 90% of them would say, yes, I buy all my groceries, pretty much all my groceries online. While if I ask a German class, then maybe 10% of them, which is kind of representative for the whole population, would buy their stuff online, right? So there's fair differences across regions, but again, there's a lot of people who buy stuff online. There's all kinds of products that are being delivered online, and what we also see is that same-day delivery or even delivery within 20-30 minutes, just think about the service of gorillas, say, is increasing, right? And that's a huge challenge because if you deliver within 20 minutes, then you typically cannot consolidate the delivery such that you leave with the full truck, right? But rather you have maybe just a very small portion of the truck filled. You rush to the consumer, rush back to the warehouse, and then try to serve the next customer, right? So that means that we have to think about such services, while they sound interesting, right, and they sound promising from an environmental point of view, they might just be a disaster. Okay, so what we do see is significant growth in the urban last mile, and that's once again our motivation to actually talk about this here. Now, if we do nothing, right, in other words, we carry on as we do now, right, which hopefully is not going to be the case. I think COP26, you probably talked about that last time, has shown us that there's a willingness to act, right, but it takes collective action. And so if we do nothing, then we see a significant increase in delivery vehicles. We see a significant increase in emissions, right, by 2030. And remember, the Paris goals require us to essentially halve the emissions by 2030, right? And if we here see there is a, well, let me see, percentage-wise, roughly 20-25% increase, right? That, of course, is a disaster. And then congestion with all kinds of negative consequences is another fact that is going to increase, right? So more vehicles creating more emissions, creating even more congestion, which even creates further emissions, right? That's a problem that we're talking about here. And then what can be done? We can switch to better vehicles, right? We could switch, for instance, to electric vehicles, right? Obviously, we then have to think about how do we generate the electricity, right? Right now in Germany, for instance, if we were to switch significantly to electric vehicles, the effect would rather not be very positive because of the mix of generating assets. In France, this would be a different situation. They have a lot of nuclear power, for instance, and hence there a switch to electric vehicles is much more beneficial currently than in Germany. Right? Then we can think about how can we avoid trying to deliver something, not finding a customer, and having to deliver again, and maybe yet again, right? Because all of those extra delivery attempts, they cause CO2, they cause additional congestion, which is what we want to avoid. And then we can think about how can we better accommodate the customer, right? It's not just home delivery. There might be other ways, such as parcel lockers or delivering it to your office, to your gym, to the restaurant that you're currently in, right? Consolidation could take place where we have an urban consolidation center where then deliveries are consolidated, and then it's not DHL plus UPS plus FedEx that would deliver, but rather it's just DHL on one day or just FedEx, in order once again to avoid the number of vehicles and avoid additional emissions. We can think about kind of automated guided vehicles. We could think about more greater use of bicycles and stuff like that. And then also we can think of, well, for instance, night delivery, right? Which would then alleviate the traffic load a little bit, such that all the delivery vehicles would be off the road while all the other ones are driving, right? So in other words, there's a whole portfolio of measures that we can undertake. And the question then is, what is going to be the impact of combining those or of focusing on some of those? Now, in order to properly do this, one thing that we do need to have is we need to have good data, right? Good data in order to estimate if I switch to electric vehicles, or if I were to say load pooling or an urban consolidation center, what would be the net effect, right? We do need data, and there's a number of data sources, which you can see down here, that we could actually tap into in order to then make decisions based on models that we can build based on the data, right? So in other words, data collection is absolutely key. And the fascinating thing nowadays is that there's so much data that we can collect, right? There's telecommunications data, right? There is infrastructure data from IoT sensors. there's your smartphone data, there's traffic light data, and so forth. So lots of data that we can collect and then use in order to build good models. And based on those models, we can predict what of the interventions that I mentioned here are best fitted for a certain region, for a certain city. Okay, one example here in terms of how we can collect data and inform decisions is the study of walkability in Helsinki, where data was collected from how passengers, how people would move about, and then how certain regions should be recreated or made just more accessible to the actual passenger. Okay, and yeah, then suppose we have now collected data, we have a certain of interventions, and this is not exhaustive, right? That's just a certain set of measures that we could undertake. Suppose we have that, then we can think about what is going to be the effect of combining stuff, right? So for instance, if we were to do night delivery plus electric vehicles, plus areas where we have specific parking for delivery vehicles, such there's less blocking for the ongoing traffic, well, then in terms of emissions, we find that we actually lower the emissions by 35%. We also lower the cost, right? So this is something that makes total economic sense, even if you don't worry about the environment, right? And we can lower the congestion, and the disruption would be rather minor, right? So, and if we compare those numbers with what would obtain if we did nothing, then of course you see that this is a huge step forward, right? So in other words, there is technology out there that can be used. This technology can be combined in proper ways in order to make environmental sense, in order to make economic sense, and in order to make the whole city more livable, for instance, in terms of the level of congestion, right? So in other words, there's a lot of potential moving this forward and getting us from the car-oriented city towards a sustainable mobility city, towards a places city. Right. Now, what does that mean for you? What are the topics that you might be looking into related to that? And I just mentioned 3 of them here. Of course, there's many more, and maybe you want to discuss some of those or suggest further ones. So the first thing is, I talked about the data aspect, right? We need good data to build models, but also we can use the data to, for instance, deploy machine learning in order to better forecast what are mobility patterns, or what are consumer demands in terms of deliveries, such that we can better route the vehicles, such that we can better consolidate deliveries. Another aspect that needs to be considered pretty much with all kinds of sustainability related activities is that ultimately their success will be dependent on how does the consumer, you and I, how do we react to the offerings? And that then can be done by looking at kind of what's the behavioral aspects of such policies. And maybe we can use nudging, right, in order to get the consumer to not buy everything online, or in order to have maybe 1 delivery day per week rather than deliveries every day and stuff like that. Right, and then the last thing is exploring technology options. Again, there's quite a few. If you look at those and think about what could be appropriate migration paths in terms of when does it make sense to buy such technology? What does it mean for the urban area? What are the investments required? And what can the risk management look like, right? Because much of the technology is relatively new, right? Has not been tested very thoroughly yet, and hence you also have to think about the risk involved, right? So that's it from my side, and yeah, I look forward to kind of discussing some of those aspects, or your questions, or your comments and insights on that topic.
Thank you so much, Stefan. It was fantastic to have your view on this aspect. And now I would encourage everybody to take your chance and ask as many questions as you can, as long as we have Stefan with us. I see some of them coming in. Lara, would you like to speak in? You can just jump in and shout out.
Hi.
Yeah, hi.
I can read the question. And how can this data be collected and processed while respecting the privacy of citizens? Datafication, its process is not too much studied yet, but it's affected too many data. It's not like more knowledge, and how you can do this kind of decision about how data we can collect.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Lara. I think you mentioned a very important point that, of course, more data not necessarily leads to better decisions, right? So there's kind of commonly there's a pyramid that we see, right? At the base, we have good data and clean data and stuff like that. And then the next stage would be to turn this data into information, then build models, and then use those models to take better decisions, right? So in other words, there's quite a few steps in between. And the way to get there would be to initially look at in, well, pilot areas or in kind of project environments to look into, to better study what are the data that we need in order to make better decisions, right? What are the data that we must have? What are the data that we could have but don't necessarily need? And what are some of the data that maybe we should not use because of privacy issues and stuff like that, right? So I think that that the issue that you mentioned is something that is highly relevant. However, that can be dealt with by essentially studying more carefully in, well, city environments, what type of data is needed in order to make better decisions.
Thank you so much. Ku Sui, and then Moti.
Hi, good afternoon. Professor Stefan. I'm a real estate person, so I deal with physical real estate for my job, and I'm researching for my school. I'm researching how autonomous vehicles will be able to interact with real estate, and how it might force urban planners to have to change the rules in urban planning. But in my recent literature search, I have only found literature that is regarding AVs moving on the streets. And so I see a gap in the last mile, and the last mile means that the autonomous vehicles can come alongside your building to the curb. But if your building has a ingress and egress, meaning your building has a drop-off point, for example, the luxury hotels, for example, a hospital or a school, where the autonomous vehicles will have to leave the government road. And after leaving the government road, you'll be driving into private land, let's say the school, and then you will drop off, or you will have to pick up somebody from the pickup bay, and then you would have to leave the school in order to join the public roads again. And I am struggling with finding literature that could allow the autonomous vehicles to really cover that last mile of getting into the building. So if we apply this to the delivery of goods, you can have your McDonald's that you order online, the navigation will take you to the building, but then once it gets into the building, the delivery man cannot navigate his vehicle into the precincts of the school in order to get to block B, which is where the school teacher has asked for the hamburger. Would you be able to point me to the correct research groups that might be investigating this area of the last mile?
Yeah, I think that's indeed a rather challenging one. From the research that I've seen going on in Germany, for instance, in terms of using AGVs for last mile, it's mostly, as you mentioned, kind of deliveries to the curbside, right? And then essentially stopping there. I guess one thing that is often mentioned, and that, for instance, leads DHL Deutsche Post to predict that they will still be using postmen by 2040, is exactly this problem that if it comes to delivery indoors, there might be all kinds of navigation issues, there might be all kinds of obstacles, there might be vandalism taking place, right? People might just destroy the delivery part or whatever you're talking about. So I must say I'm not aware of any group specifically focusing on this aspect.
I think there will be also no group specifically focusing on this aspect, because it's going really to a very private sector. I mean, I'm living in an apartment where I probably would not like any postman to get to the third floor to me. I mean, probably I would like to, but the other neighbors not. So it's another thing, right? With data protection or privacy protection. Moti, would you like to jump in?
Okay, thank you very much for nice presentation, professors. Maybe I have one question, especially maybe I'm from Ethiopia. Ethiopia is one of developing country or East African countries. What kinds of opportunity maybe we have to tackle this, which comes from transportation problem? Maybe different effects maybe exist. Exactly to tackle the problems which comes from this transportation problem, we do not have financial accesses. It is possible for, or it is obvious in developing country. What kinds of opportunity maybe we have to tackle these challenges, Professor?
Yeah, I think you raise a very important point, in that the interventions that I proposed here are probably kind of looked at from a perspective of developed economies, right? If you think about developing or emerging economies, then I think one thing that can be done is to leverage kind of the fact that most people have smartphones or mobile phones, right? And to leverage the data that comes with that, right? In terms of figuring out where are people, how do they move, what does that mean for transportation services and things like that, right? That's the first thing. And the second thing that must happen is that the transfer mechanisms that have been discussed within the COP meetings, the Conference of the Parties, that they must make sure that investments are being made in emerging economies, such that, for instance, clean fuel vehicles, right, can be deployed at a low cost in developing economies. Right. So if you think about electric vehicles, for instance, then of course you need to have the electric power available. Hence, you also have to think about how to think about this sector, right, in order to do that. But then there might be other options in terms of clean fuel that may make sense for emerging economies, right? So in other words, I think there's a couple of things that you can do right now, such as leveraging the data from everyone who has mobile phones, and there's lots of people there. And the second thing is that there must be investments made by some of the actors in the developed world towards developing infrastructure and associated transportation in the emerging economies.
Thank you,
Okay.
Stefan. Very last question before we move forward is coming from Michael Joseph. He is asking about your position on the use of UAVs for delivery as a part of strategies in greening the last mile.
So yeah, I think drones or unmanned air vehicles can be a good kind of complementary part of a transportation system. For instance, when it comes to rural areas, right? So you would have, for instance, a truck delivering items to the customers, and in parallel, you could have a drone flying to other more remote customers, and then save overall mileage of the delivery vehicle, right? So that's a possibility. However, I don't think that the massive usage of drones would solve any kind of environmental or ecological problems in cities, right? I think that they are part of or can be part of a future urban infrastructure, but their massive deployment is something that I don't just see right now.
Thank you so much, Stefan. And just to comment on your very last slide, which we see at this moment, I like it a lot because yesterday I had a very interesting conversation with Professor Jakob Beer, who used to lead the Department of Digitization at SSC Schäfer, and he changed to Würzburg to be an academia, a professor, and we have been discussing the issue of sustainable urban logistics, and we came to the point that avoiding transport is not realistic, but rather making it more efficient would be probably more realistic choice. And all your 3 points, which are listed here, are actually talking about this issue to make the transport more efficient rather than completely avoid it, because I also think that we cannot do it, even though the Green Party in Germany tries to do this, but I don't think that it's going to be
I think there's
a
requirement for transportation as well as human mobility, right? So we have to deal with that and then make it as a kind of resource saving as possible, I guess.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stefan. Could you please do a favor, stop sharing your slides, and all the people who are there could probably switch on their cameras. We would like to have take a picture with all of us, if it's possible. Fabian and Gohar, could you make this happen?
Yes, we're about to.
Yeah, that's great. And I see that Yikian Shank is here from ICLEI. Hi. So we will have the picture with both speakers right now from the session. That's good. You make a sign, Gohar or Fabian?
Fabian,
what should we do?
Yes, I now see a wall of nice people in front of me on the big screen, but still not everyone has switched their video on. So maybe just for a few seconds and then maybe one more little smile so that we have a nice picture to share afterwards.
You have to tell me when I have to smile as an exception.
I will count down.
Okay.
Still not everyone has their video on, but I guess we are good with this. So I will press the button in a few seconds. And please smile, everybody. Okay. On the first side, I haven't gone through all the 50 pictures now, but I think this is good. I will share it immediately with you and in a better quality in another context.
Thank you, Fabian. That's great.
Thanks
Stefan,
very much.
thank you
Take
so
care,
much.
guys. And if you want to be in touch, like on the very first slide, you have my email or you find me on LinkedIn. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Stefan.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Good, everybody. Thank you for your active participation. Now we go to the second presentation of today. And this is going to be Yixian Shan from ICLEI, who is going to give a talk about about EcoLogistics, and which is going to be a low carbon freight for sustainable cities. So who is Yixian? She is Sustainable Mobility Officer at ICLEI World Secretariat. She co-leads the EcoLogistics initiative at ICLEI, working with cities and industries in sustainable urban freight, policy planning, and solutions implementation. Her expertise includes urban freight transport, emission accounting and reporting, transportation policy scenario building, sustainable urban mobility development in Asia, Europe, and Latin America. She has a master's in Erasmus Mundus Global Studies from the University of Vienna and Leipzig University. She has previously worked for NGOs in the fields of sustainability, climate change, and European policies. So, Yixian, it's our pleasure to have you here, and you can start sharing your slides and start your presentation. Thank you so much. Yes, we can. Yeah, we could see the slides.
Yeah, just give me a second. Okay, I'll do that again. Can you see the slides now? Yeah, I'm sorry if there's any internet connection, so I might switch off my video cam like at a certain point. But yeah, thank you very much, Annie, for the kind introduction and also for having me here. So my name is Yixian. I work for ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, which is based, the World Secretariat is based in Bonn, Germany. And then today I'll be talking to you about the EcoLogistics project, which is implemented by ICLEI together with a host of experts. And then in terms of today's agenda, I'll probably first introduce about ICLEI, and then I'll just give a very general overview about urban freight. I think Professor Stefan has already mentioned a lot of points and said very good thing already. And then I'll also touch upon like how we work with the cities through the project implementation, and then finally some conclusion remarks from my side. So for those of you who are not familiar with ICLEI, so ICLEI is a city-to-city network, which includes 2,500 local and regional governments worldwide. And we work with cities in different thematic aspects related to, for instance, like resilient development, sustainable mobility development, or low emission development, etc. And then we are active in more than 125 countries. And we also have offices in, we have 24 offices worldwide. For instance, in Europe, we have a European Secretariat, which is based in Freiburg, and the World Secretariat is based in Bonn. And we also have a Berlin office in Germany. So when we talk about urban freight, I know that Professor Stefan has already touched upon some of the points, but I think just to reiterate some of the things, when we talk about urban freight, basically, of course, includes the retail, for instance, also waste construction, and also road services, and also restaurant and catering industry, etc. It means the goods are distributed and dispatched into, out and off and within the urban areas. And especially given the context of the urbanization. So currently there are more than half of the population lives in the urban areas, and then this number is expected to increase to 68% by 2050. So urbanization has been and will continue also to be very pronounced, especially in emerging economies. So with ever increasing urbanization, and of course also along with that, the economic development, that means the demand for transport will also increase rapidly, especially if you look at the freight transport. According to the International Transport Forum, they usually publish these transport ITF Transport Outlook biannually. So according to the report in 2019, it is projected that freight demand will triple by 2050, and its associated carbon emissions will of course also double by 2050. And when we look at the last mile, which is the last leg of the shipment of the supply chain, we notice that also, for instance, according to the World Economic Forum, they mentioned the number of delivery vehicles in the top 100 cities globally will also increase by 36%, and its emissions will also increase rapidly. So given this context, that's why at ICLEI we place a lot of focus on EcoLogistics, which is a term coined by ICLEI. So especially when you look at EcoLogistics, it's not only when you talk about urban freight, of course, it's related to the emission, like we just touched upon, and of course it also takes up a road space. For instance, in the European cities, it takes up 40% of the motorized road space and also represents up to 25% of the traffic, and it contributes, of course, also to air pollutants and also transport. It takes up 40% of the urban transport related emissions. And especially in the cities, in the urban area context, as cities grow, these increasing freight movements will also present urban challenges, which includes, for instance, noise and air pollution, and also like a lot of traffic accidents associated with especially heavy duty vehicles. And also it contributes also to congestion, and essentially it impacts the quality of life of the residents living in these urban areas. So that's why understanding the flows of urban freight is important piece, basically, to understand how the socio-economic system of a city work, and manage the freight flows is also very closely linked to the economic development, and also for creating eventually a livable and people-centered urban environment. So like I mentioned before, EcoLogistics is a term coined by ICLEI. It essentially promotes the transportation of goods by giving priority to health, safety, low emission, and also people-centered urban development. And we also want to encourage circular and regional economy, even while also limiting the impact of freight transport. So for those of you who wanted to learn a bit more about EcoLogistics initiative, feel free to browse the web link. And then currently, so under the umbrella of the EcoLogistics initiative at ICLEI, we have the EcoLogistics community, which essentially is the first global network consisting of local governments and also partners committed to bringing sustainable urban logistics into reality. And the aim is to build a global platform of cities worldwide who are pioneers in the space of urban freight. And currently, Taoyuan City is the chair and also host of the EcoLogistics community. And then this is the project that I'm going to focus more for the rest of the presentation, which is called EcoLogistics Low Carbon Freight for Sustainable Cities. So this is a project that started in 2017 and is still ongoing, and it's supported by the BMU, the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, and through the International Climate Initiative. So this project is also implemented by ICLEI, but also we support from the organizations, as you can see on the screen, the Zaragoza Logistics Center, which is based in Zaragoza, and then Despacho, which is based in Colombia, and also Smart Freight Center, which is based in the Netherlands. So together with this group of experts, basically we want to capacitate the local governments in three countries, in Argentina, Colombia, and also India. And our aim is also through the implementation, we want to build the strategies and the policies to promote sustainable and low carbon urban freight. And then this will be done, of course, also on a local level, but then it will also be scaled up to the national level to inform the national level policy making. So just in terms of the project cities, we have 9 cities. In Argentina, we have Cordoba, Rosario, Santa Fe, and in Colombia, for instance, we have Bogota, which is the capital city. And in India, we also have 3 project cities. In terms of the project activities, so basically what we are currently doing now, it can be divided into 3 sections. One is called the baseline setting. That means we want to establish the multi-stakeholder working group, and then to work with them closely to inform the policy making. And another aspect of this is like we want to also measure the emissions from urban freight. That's why we also develop a tool to help the cities to measure their emissions. And then the next section will be related to the action planning and then the implementation of demonstration projects, and also to inform the national policy recommendations, like I previously mentioned. And the third layer of this project is we want to facilitate these peer-to-peer exchange, especially for the cities in the global north and also in the global south, so that the good practices of sustainable urban freight can be well documented and further disseminated. So I think you must also be aware that freight activity is difficult to understand because it is very fragmented, and also there are so many actors involved. That includes not only the private sector, which for instance like the shippers, carriers, also distributors or freight forwarders, etc., but also involves the public sector, which includes the different authorities within the city governments or regional governments, and also it involves actually, for instance, organizations like ICLEI or other civil society players. And apart from that, of course, also the road users, which includes also the pedestrians, the cyclists, and anyone, for instance, who is using public transport, because essentially it's also about the allocation of road space. So that's why, as you can see on the pic, like everything that's circled in the red circle, it's like everyone is involved. So that's why, for instance, in the city of Bogota, they have established this urban logistics network, which essentially is multi-stakeholder working group, which is mandated through the project, of course. And then they have this working group, which is already part of their existing program called Incalcate Bogota. So within the program, more than, for instance, 160 organizations, they come together and then they want to improve logistics. And then this alliance seeks to also facilitate the freight traffic flows in Bogota, and they also want to promote and also recognizes good practices of urban logistics in the city. And then another example is also from Bogota. For instance, one of the major issues they want to tackle with is air pollution, and that's why they also put a lot of focus on urban logistics because it contributes a significant amount, especially, for instance, to PM 2.5, PM 10, and also NOx. So that's why they created this pact for air quality. So basically, it's agreement also between the private stakeholders and also the public stakeholders. And their aim of the Bogota is to renew 11,000 light and medium-sized trucks. And through this program, they want to, of course, reduce the particulate matter in the city. And also, of course, the GHG emission that comes along with that. So as I mentioned earlier, like we also want to set up the baseline for the cities so that they know what's the emission contribution from the logistics sector, especially because given the urgency of climate change, and then climate change disclosure has also become a norm, like within the cities that we work with. So that's why tracking the emissions from different sectors, it's essentially very important, but then it also comes along with a lot of challenges. Like I think like Professor Stefan earlier mentioned, for instance, when you talk about data, in this case, because ICLEI is a city-to-city network, so we often talk to the cities. When we talk to the cities and ask them for the data related to transport, they often have data related to passenger mobility, but not in the case of urban freight transport. Oftentimes, they also lack the comprehensive understanding and also like common technology and also tools to manage urban freight. And that's why, given this context within a project, we developed this self-monitoring tool, which essentially is an easy-to-use tool, is Excel spreadsheet-based, and then we want local governments to use this tool to estimate and evaluate and also track their emissions in the course of, let's say, from now until like 2025, 2030, so that they can see the changes. And use this tool, we collect the data from the private companies within these 9 project cities, and then we are able to provide a baseline measurement of the emissions Okay, this is just also an overview of what the tool entails, but of course, feel free also to just check the link that is shared here so that you know which elements is covered under this tool. So apart from the, a side note, so apart from the emission calculation, we also want to assess the impact. For instance, currently, due to the priorities of the project cities, we only included 4 intervention points, which includes the fuel technology change, for instance, to switch from gasoline to, let's say, biofuel, or LPG or LNG, etc. And then also it involves eco-driving and also off-hour deliveries. So this is just also for your information. And then based on the tool calculation, we also launched a report called EcoLogistics Report 2021, and then we launched it in March 20. We launched it in March actually, and then through this report aims to provide an overview of the urban freight movement characteristics in these 9 project cities, and also we try to provide an account of their current GHG emissions. And then it's also designed as a baseline, basically, for these 9 project cities to measure their emissions, and then also to be used further for decision making in the development of action plan, which I'm also going to touch upon a bit later. So in this report, you can find a wide range of urban freight parameters, which includes, for instance, like some socioeconomic factors, some infrastructure related data, and also freight transport specific data, which for instance includes like vehicle data or fuel consumption data, and also like their load factor, etc. So this data is basically, like I said, it's collected via questionnaires and also interviews with the private stakeholders, and also it was consulted with the city officials in each project city. And then it was also further validated by the multi-stakeholder working group. And then in the next slide, you can see, for instance, this is what we did. We tried to project also the business as usual scenario for the urban freight emissions in these cities, which essentially means no further intervention is taken up. So the emissions will grow drastically, as you can see also in the graph, until 2050. And then through the tool, we also understand, for instance, where the emissions are from. Like most of the time, based on the data sets, like most of the emissions come from diesel-fueled vehicles in these project cities, because because they still make up a big chunk of the freight vehicle fleet in these cities. And the next slide, you can also see basically what kind of vehicle type are there in these cities. Of course, in each city, they have different vehicle classifications, and it varies also like city by city, country by country. But basically what we can observe is like the big chunk of emissions actually are more attributable to the heavier goods vehicles in comparison to the light ones. Like I previously mentioned, so what we have developed so far is also the action plans in each of the project cities. So when you talk about freight plan, I'm not sure if you guys know, for instance, like in the front runners of a sustainable urban logistics, like Stockholm, Sweden, and Seattle, and also some front runner cities, they have already developed such freight plan, which essentially is about including like city goods related work, and also it will point the way forward for these cities. So when we talk about urban freight, we want to raise the awareness also among the local stakeholders, and that's why we also want to encourage them, for instance, to set up a long-term vision for EcoLogistics or long-term vision for sustainable urban freight, especially when you're also creating, let's say, a sustainable urban mobility plan or any transport master transportation plan. So you also need to take freight into account, not only because of the very important role that I just mentioned in the very beginning, but also because it will help the local government to specify, for instance, the long-term goals for a very efficient and also optimized urban freight movement in the short term, in the medium term, and also in the long run. So it points to you like what kind of measures or actions need to be taken in order to fulfill those targets and the city's overall sustainability vision. Yeah. And this report is also published on our website, and also the city's, each project city's specific action plan will also follow shortly. I mean, we are still in the preparation phase. So apart from the action plan, what we want to do is also to implement demonstration projects in these project cities. That's why in each country we've selected city which can pilot any initiative that's related to urban freight, because most of the time, especially for instance, if you talk about emerging markets, they often lack the budget or financing even to implement any sustainable urban freight initiatives. So that's why we want to start from small, and then want to see what's the like a replicability of the pilot project, and then to see if we can secure further finance and funding to scale up. So as you can see, for instance, in Rosario, what they are trying to do is to integrate a integrate the use of cargo bikes into existing public bike sharing system, which is called Mi Bici Tu Bici. Actually, they are very good at the public bike sharing system in Latin America. And in Bogota, we also want to implement some consolidation centers and with the use of zero emission or low emission vehicles. And in Kochi, we also want to promote three-wheelers for last mile deliveries in one of the congested area. And here is another example of a Bogota using like of our deliveries, but it's also beyond our EcoLogistics project, but just also to give an idea what they are doing. For instance, like projects like this, they also try to measure and monitor the results. So just to, I think just to wrap up, based on the experience of our project, what we always communicate with the local governments or with the transport and urban planners in these cities is like we think for urban freight must be, it shouldn't be afterthought anymore, and it should be put on the radar of the city officials. That's why you also need to incorporate into any of the mobility strategies or mobility plans or cities overall transport vision. And when you talk about policy regulations or interventions, there are just a wide range of interventions to choose from. For instance, you have urban access regulations, or you also have all kinds of time windows to restrict the, let's say, restrict the flow of heavy goods vehicles in the city centers. But all those things you need to take into, you also need to talk to the stakeholders basically to understand their needs and to bring them onto the same table so that you can have like open discussion. And then when you really release those like when you put those regulations out, then there will be less, let's say, pushback from the private or business that will involve, that are going to be impacted by such regulations. And that's why we stress the importance of multi-stakeholder engagement. And another point is about data. Of course, it's like we want to also make city officials be aware of the importance of urban freight data. So apart from passenger mobility data, you also need to start to collect now, and then to be able to measure, for instance, the emissions based on the data, so that you can chart your pathway forward in terms of sustainable urban logistics. And also based on our projects, like pilot projects are also a very good way for you to kickstart any discussion related to sustainable urban logistics in the cities. And last but not least, given the whole range of solutions that exist already in the space, for instance, like you can see in the pictures on the right side, it's like there's a whole range of solutions, use of cargo bikes, of our deliveries, and consolidation center, blah, blah, blah. But the important thing for the city is like you need to be flexible, you need to leverage the use of data and the leverage use of new technologies for yeah, to leverage the benefits of it and also to reap its advantages, basically, so that you can move forward. And the last one is like what ICLEI has developed is the EcoLogistics principles. So we also want to use these as a guiding principle for local governments, basically to start to think about logistics and to move ahead in the space. I think this is the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Shan, so much for your great overview about ICLEI activities which are running all over the world. This is a very comprehensive analysis on public intervention on sustainable urban mobility plans, which is really very interesting to follow. I have seen in the chat there are some conversations taking on already among the participants, and I would like to give you the chance to shortly reply on this. Just a short notice. I have seen that Frauke Heistermann, who is going to give the next talk, is already here. Actually, we were supposed to move on at 3:05. So we are behind the schedule for 10 minutes. Sorry for that, Frauke, but I wanted to give the chance to the participants to discuss the pressing issues with our speakers, like with Stefan. And now I would like to give the short chance also to discuss the questions with Ishan. So the first question which rose here was what can we do for sustainable mobility if government or people refuse to do anything because of economic profit? And the conversation went on based on this note, saying some other people commenting that collaboration should take place between public stakeholders and the industrial stakeholders, and some interesting international expertises or experiences came from Taiwan, saying, for instance, but Taiwan faces many protests from people. Then we went to China, saying that, China is also facing some problems. Electrical usage is restricted these days in some big cities. And that was basically the conversation going on. So if you would like to comment.
Yeah, thank you for all these questions. I think it's all tied with the role of stakeholders in whether it's about sustainable urban mobility or sustainable urban logistics, at least based on our project experience and also other projects that we've implemented, for instance, in Kaohsiung and also in China. The idea is like, if you want to push forward any policies, basically, it's like you need to tell the stakeholders about the incentives and also about the benefits. So for instance, like I mentioned very earlier, when we talk about urban freight, it's not only about, let's say, the goods being delivered to the customer, it's also about the other benefits that, let's say, if you switch from a combustion engine vehicles to an electric vehicle, that it brings down, it reduces, for instance, noise pollution. Also, if you switch it from a bigger vehicle to smaller, let's say, electric vans or electric tricycles or quadrats, it's like they also take up less road space, and then that means also the road accidents that are related to it is also it will also be fewer, and then that means essentially it's about the quality of life for the local residents. So I think that's one way to talk about to address the concerns of the general public. And then when it comes to public stakeholders, I think most of the time, especially for instance, when we talk about urban freight or even let's say now, which is a very trendy issue, it's like electric vehicles or e-mobility, it's like they don't know, for instance, whether they should be investing a lot of money into the market already into developing these vehicles. But then it's important then for the government to really to set a regulatory framework for them to be able to work on this. So that's why I think that's a discussion that we've been having a lot also with the city officials and also with the industry, that you need to have this enabling environment for the private companies to work, to further work, and then for them to invest or to create a mass market, for instance, for sustainable freight vehicles. So I think, and apart from that, there are also a lot of effective ways for stakeholder engagement. Some good example, for instance, like in Münster, for instance, I know they have a long tradition also of involving stakeholders through like public information gatherings or through like questionnaires or online surveys, etc. And also you can address these concerns by talking to the people like face to face. That's what we did, for instance, in Kaohsiung in 2017. We hosted a Eco-Mobility World Festival where we closed one neighborhood like without any cars for one entire month. And of course, there's a lot of pushback from the business saying that, okay, that might affect our business, blah, blah. But then the idea is like, we tell them, you know, like we will give you, for instance, free public transport use for 1 month, and then the government will also lease you, for instance, electric scooters, etc. So apart from the benefits that it will bring by switching to sustainable urban mobility, you can also give them incentives so that they understand, okay, then this is good. I think in general, overall, it's about the awareness raising, not only among the general public, but also among the different, let's say, actors that are related to this. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Azam has asked a very precise question, reflecting on ICLEI role to reduce diesel-powered vehicles in order to reduce the overall emissions. Whether you take any measures, as far as I understand from ICLEI role, it's not to go into technology development and make a precise measure to reduce diesel-powered vehicles, but rather to moderate the dialogue among stakeholders to take the best options, right? But you can.
That's very precise, Annie. Yeah, so ICLEI is a city-to-city network. Of course, we try to encourage cities to move towards people-centered mobility, to move away from car-centric approach, basically. But of course, this is done through the different projects and initiatives that we have. For instance, through the Eco-Mobility Alliance or the Eco-Mobility World Festival that I mentioned, and also, for instance, the project like EcoLogistics. And essentially also through the implementation of projects, we also try to create these communication campaigns, etc. So it's like our role is like to work with the cities to help them, but not really, let's say, on-ground implementation per se. So it's for them also, for instance, through the peer-to-peer exchange, the cities, for instance, in China, they know the good practices of sustainable mobility, etc. So it's done through, like, let's say, different layers. Yeah.
And back to my comment previously, which I have done about the conflict, to avoid transportation, but make it more efficient. So these challenges are still there, surely. It is very important to highlight the role of consumers in avoiding transportation, because without making this change, it will not take place, the avoidance of the transportation and the transformation towards more sustainable urban areas. There is another question, and I would say that we take this last question and then close the conversation. Rwanda is a landlocked country where it's important, where import exceeds export. The economy mostly depends on taxes. 100 years ago, the country was depending on fuel, specifically cooking, vehicles, and even electric generation. Up to date, the country intends to promote e-mobility. How do you think the economy will be affected? Is it easy to move to e-freight even before the public transport does it?
To be honest, I haven't done any research related to, for instance, the relationship between economic development and also the use of, let's say, electric vehicles or the generation of renewable energy. But what I can say is, like, for instance, we've done also some projects in Africa, and there are also a lot of trainings related to electric mobility transition in Africa. So I can also forward you such materials. And the last point related to the electric freight vehicles and public transport, I would say it's like you look at the sustainable mobility and sustainable urban freight, I think as a whole ecosystem, it's like public transport. It's always like the backbone of any transport system, because of course it can transport people in large volume, and also like there are a lot of let's say initiatives and also cities action now to move towards electric buses, etc. But I mean, when you look at urban freight, I still think like for instance, even you switch from heavy goods vehicle to an electric van in the urban area, especially, that would address the issues in the last mile, which I think it has been very much touched upon by Professor Stefan earlier. So it brings also different benefits. And then I think we are not comparing them like side by side, but of course you need to address these whole issues as an ecosystem. So I think that's my final answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was fantastic having you here. So now we will go to Frauke Heistermann, and we will take no polls because Ms. Heistermann has to hurry up into the next session. So yeah, we are going aside to Frauke Heistermann, who is going to share the trends and future of logistics. Ms. Heistermann is Managing Director at AXIT Capital and founder and spokesman of the Wirtschaftsmacher. She is co-founder of AXIT AG, cloud-based digitization platform to manage global supply chains with more than 300,000 international users and top references in industry, retail, and logistics sale in 2015 to Siemens. Frauke has over 25 years experience in digitization, IT, cloud, Internet of Things, big data, supply chain management, logistics, IT product management, innovation management, business development, consultative selling, content marketing, various publications, an experienced speaker and moderator at international conferences. So, and she runs social media campaigns for digital sales and lead generation since 2019. So the bunch of expertise Frauke Heistermann brings here makes me very much delighted to very cordially welcome you with us, Frauke, and you have the word.
So thank you very much, Annie, for the warm welcome to everybody. Yes, okay, I hope you can see my screen. Okay, perfect. So Annie asked me to prepare a presentation. Today, the topic is urban logistics, but in general, we agreed that today I will hold a presentation in general concerning trends and future of logistics. I think it's an interesting topic, and yeah, hopefully sharing these trends and future of logistics with you will also give you, or some of you, more insights in how this industry, this very interesting industry of logistics, will maybe look like in the next 5 years. So yeah.
Frauke, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry to come in. Could you please make a full mode of presentation so that we can see the slide? Yeah, that's right. Yes, perfect.
Yeah, okay, sometimes there is the problem that with my Apple, when I now click to the next slide, the click isn't shown. Do you see now the next slide?
Yes, we do.
Ah, okay, yep. Perfect. Then that's very good. Okay, so before I really start with sharing with you the trends of future logistics, I just want to open your mind to imagine what could be possible in future. And maybe this is a picture which describes this quite well, the underground hyperloop. And this really fits to urban logistics indeed, because via the underground hyperloop, you could reduce traffic jams. And if you now think, well, this is really, really far away, there is already a real estate investor in logistics for parks in Hamburg. And actually, they are building exactly that at the moment. So they are creating a connection between a distribution center outside of Hamburg with the inner city of Hamburg. And via this underground hyperloop, it is planned to proceed many, many pallets to save more than 10,000 CO2 tons per year and reduce traffic in the city. This is, by the way, also an idea Elon Musk is working on in the US business already. Or maybe just another idea, I like that very much, an intelligent robotics in the freight center, and in the inbound part of this freight center, they could reproduce themselves automatically via 3D printing when they see that there is an inbound volume, which is very, very high, and they need more capacities in unloading the trucks. There may be then the question, okay, and what happens with them when they have produced themselves and then you do not need them for the next day because maybe inbound volume goes down. But for sure, there will be the next days the possibility that you use them again because inbound volume is rising. But this, I think, is very interesting to integrate AI and 3D printing in intelligent processes. And just another example, and after that, I would like to share with you the concrete trends. I like that example very much. Up in the air, the warehouse above the city, that fits, by the way, also to urban logistics, to your topic today. So this is one of a lot of logistics patents of Amazon. And the idea is to have this warehouse up in the air because in the city, there is no place. There is a fight about real estates, and especially for logistics, it's difficult and very cost intensive to have warehouses or micro hubs directly in the city. So why not having a warehouse flying in the air, and there are drones who are picking up the volumes and the packages and distributing them then to the city, to the consignees. So possibly we will see that in future. But now coming, oh, now I can't click. Yeah, now coming to the trends in logistics. And first of all, I think it is about fragility of supply chains, and this requires more resilience in future. You see that today, already today, we need the ability to react very flexibly to unpredictable risks. This could be the risk we have now seen and felt all in the Corona times. This could be risk based on natural disasters. Happening somewhere at the world, but they are affecting these global supply chains, which are all connected with each other. This could be strikes in a harbor, but we are also somehow affected out of that from this because the supply chain is hurted. So the prediction of risks before they happen, this is really an issue which is necessary for logistics to make their mind about that, and to design faster and really more agile processes. It will be common and normal that we have in the daily business unpredictable risk, which we couldn't foresee. And to react on that and to be always prepared to react on that, this is the challenge for the logistics in future. It is not any longer about making an exact sustainable plan of your supply chain and execute it. This will often be attacked by other things we cannot foresee. From my perspective, this is also very, very interesting. Interesting task for supply chain managers in the future. Second issue is the climate change in general. So logistics acts in future instead of reacts. And there is a big difference in acting versus reacting. They are inventing alternative drives like hydrogen or battery. They are inventing new concepts in green logistics, especially also green logistics, and I will come to that in the digitalization topic, which is supported by digitalization because we can better plan transport, we can save empty kilometers driven by a truck and so on. There will be for sure a shift to rail, but there will be also higher logistics costs due to that climate change and the issues logistics needs to do there. There will be an overall more pressure to innovate based on climate change. And this will be for sure a competitive advantage. I'm not sure if you already taught in your winter school about ESG, but this is also a topic related to that climate change. So ESG means environmental social governance, and especially for companies which are stock rated. This is an important KPI to measure what they are doing. And this will also have an impact on how high they are rated on stock in future. So the E of environmental social governance means, for instance, to check how much are companies investing in renewable energies, how efficient are they handling energies or raw materials, how green are their suppliers or their customers, and how low is their emission they put into the air or water or street, for instance. So all those topics, so ESG will really be a powerful instrument in future. And then we have for sure my favorite topic, digitalization. So it's about AI, so artificial intelligence, robotics, wearables, very cool thing, just having a button in the ear and the drivers of a truck will be able to talk or to understand 50 languages, 50 different languages without having learned them in school. Internet of Things, analytics, or building digital twins to test things before they go live in the real environment. Digitalization is also and will be even more an enabler of collaboration along the supply chain, along the players and stakeholders in the supply chain. Because digitalization reduces all those interfaces and makes them smooth and supports people in thinking in one global supply chain instead of each and every company thinks only in its part of the supply chain. Because the potential to improve is over the whole supply chain and not thinking only in your own company's processes. And collaboration and digitalization is a lot about the mindset which we need to change to be willing to share data, to have a shared economy where you share knowledge and data. And if you see that today, I often hear companies or CEOs who say, yeah, we know data is the future gold, but that's the reason we don't want to share our data. We want to own our data and people can share them with us, but we will not publish our data. And in that case, I always tell them, data is not any longer any gold and not valuable because data is only really increasing its value if you share it with others. Because based on this, you have more knowledge, you have more opportunities, and we really, really need this changing in our mindset that we support the shared economy, sharing of data and sharing of knowledge. Finally, we do all that to realize more transparency. And if you ask people, logisticians or customers, why do you need more transparency? The answer is always, well, because we want to be more reliable. That's it. We are not doing transparency just because we like transparency. The aim is to have really reliable processes in supply chains and to know where are problems and to know in advance how to handle those problems. On the other hand, we often see today that the digital readiness of processes is still missing. And this will unfortunately also be the case in future. If I say digital readiness, I mean the status of a company, the readiness to really implement digital processes. Because you can't implement a digital process if you have a worse or bad real process, because then you have a bad digitalized process, and that doesn't make sense. So you need, for instance, to improve your master data. You need to improve your ability to interface with others. You need to improve your processes, that they are flexible and transparent, and that all sharers could be integrated. And there are a lot of things still to do. And finally, to that topic, as I mentioned, digitalization also supports all those things in climate protection. As I mentioned before, via intelligent transport planning, you can reduce empty kilometers, you can optimize transportation ways and reduce kilometers. You could better fill trucks and so on. So there are great possibilities in the future between those two things. Fourth point is, and this is why I love logistics, since the years I'm in that industry, logistics is consequently taking over more responsibility. When I started in logistics, it was not really part of the company's strategy. It was a department, but nothing more. And now logistics has really reached the top of the companies. It has reached the management levels. Why? because logistics has a coordination and management function in those global supply chains. There are no better people than logisticians in coordinating and managing those cross-company processes, from the procurement via the production to the distribution, to do all that in one smooth process, to be the architect of that. And this is, and this responsibility is already taken over from logistics. Logistics is an industry that is growing and growing, and also based on the reason that they're willing to take over more responsibility. Risk management for global supply chains is also one part which enables logistics to take over this new role in the future. And cybersecurity. You might know that there is a dramatically rising number of attacks on companies, but also on supply chains. And the IT security will be really an important part of the company's strategy in the future, and unfortunately also a part or important part of the budget position. Budgets in that area are rising and rising. So the Bitkom, for instance, says that the cost due to the attacks in 2019 were 102 billion. This was more than doubled in comparison to the year before. And in average, and this is also, wow, shocking, it takes companies 180 days to detect that they have been attacked. So a lot of time to take data out of the company. I once had the possibility to visit the Telecom Cyber Defense Center, and they showed to us that, well, attacks is daily business. There are more than 31 million of attacks per day on telecom customers, which they need to protect. Yeah, and they also mentioned that there was one night a year where they detected more than 100 new leaked accounts of their customers, which they can buy in the darknet. 100 million just in one night over all the world. So I think this shows really how important that issue is, and how important it is to stuff it with good people, to prepare your processes, to train day by day people, because one of major attack portals is per email or just addressing to people. So this is really an interesting thing, and this is for sure also for other industries, but this is something which will also be relevant for the logistics industry. And then we have mobility. So all about e-mobility, the autonomous driving, for instance, but also various mobility offers which are connected to that. And I think this also fits to urban logistics. So just imagine in the future, you as a private person want to travel from A to B. And this is not longer just an offer that you can choose the train or car, but there is someone who will organize for you the whole transport from A to B. This is maybe the pre-haul, and you get a car sharing to drive to the main station, and then you take the train, and then afterwards for your final haul, for your last mile, you love e-scooters. This is in your profile, so you will find an e-scooter for you at the train station and take it for the rest of your traveling, or a bike or whatever. So, but the change is that it's not you have to occupy with defining your travel. You will get the mobility and the support for people logistics to define your way very, very comfortably. And by the way, I just listened to a speech of real estate logistics in the cities, and they mentioned actually parking places. This is also something of mobility. They're really an issue because there are not enough, but they think that the trend will be a reduction of parking places in the city, because we will have less cars, we will have new mobility concepts, and we could take the parking places to build there something else. This was surprising for me as well. And finally, the rising cost for staff. So lucky you if you're all studying logistics, because you will never have a problem to get a really good job, to make a good career if you like to, because we are really coming in a situation of skills shortage. Actually, we are already missing stuff, and this will increase. We're missing stuff in all areas of logistics. We're actually talking about drivers who are missing, more than 8,000 drivers only in Germany, 100,000 or more in Great Britain. But it's not only about drivers, it's about IT experts, it's about mechanics for the intralogistics, it's about project managers, supply chain managers, salespersons, warehouse managers, warehouse workers. It's really, well, logistics offers jobs for each and everyone. And also this skills shortage is really is really for a lot of areas of jobs there. Okay, so these are basically the risks I have seen in looking at logistics today and thinking about, okay, where will we be in future? And finally, I think these are really challenges for companies in logistics because they need to do a lot of things in parallel. So manage their operational business as usual, push the digital transformation in parallel, produce innovations to be competitive, and manage the skills shortage in parallel to get good people to cover all those challenges and jobs. So, well, it's a challenge, but hopefully it's manageable. And if you ask me, I think logistics, yeah, what I always say is logistics really offers a wide range of chances to innovate. Why? Especially in that industry. Why? This is due to the ability of logistics to connect various stakeholders. This is where we are used to. We are thinking in global processes. We are thinking in intercompany processes. We are thinking in suppliers and consignees and transportation companies. So our thinking, our DNA is that we are thinking in cross-company processes. And I think this is a very good prerequisite to innovate. So great to be in that industry and to work for that industry, I think. And finally, and this is my last slide, there is always one key factor to success I would like to share with you. And this is always get out of your comfort zone every day, look for new things, look for things to improve, try new things, never feel too comfortably, but get out of this comfort zone. So finally, that's it. Hopefully there are some new points for you. Hopefully these are not only challenges, but you can also see that logistics is a great industry in future, and a lot of things to do for you in future.
Thank you so much, Frauke. It was very motivating to listen to you. And I could recognize some points because we represent the Center of Logistics and Traffic. And whenever we talk about the center, everybody says, oh, okay, you're just moving some parcels. And I need to say exactly your words, what you said. No, we actually understand logistics as the entire supply chain integrator. From strategical point to operational and tactical point, all the operations should be considered as a whole entity. And anytime it's always the same discussion. But yeah, still, it was very nice to listen to you. Yeah, thank you so much. And just another comment. You talked about the Hyperloop and the other options of making the warehousing systems more efficient. We have started a project, or we intend to start a project with Hyperloop in the city of Hamburg, and the state at this moment is that indeed, as you said, they are transferring the parcels from the port or peri-urban distribution center into the city center, and then that's it. What is happening from that point on, they are not still quite precise, and therefore we want to start the process with them as well to integrate the very last mile logistics with new kind of micro depots or warehousing systems, like you also mentioned. The one I liked a lot from Amazon, the balloon effect, and there were some questions coming in. What kind of a balloon is it being used for, like a hot air balloon, or is it a Zeppelin? And the people have already found it. It's very interesting to see that people follow you and then right away find the new information on website. And within our project, we want also to go another step further together with the Netherlands. And what they have is surely water. And we have called this floating warehousing system. So kind of electrical boats to be used on the channels to make the micro depot consolidation, and from there on to take the very last mile logistics. So that could be another option. Now, thank you very much. I would like to give the scene to our participants if they have other questions rather than talking about the system of the warehouse. And it was already answered. It's a Zeppelin airship filled with helium. And there is also a link there posted. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Adam has raised his hand.
Yeah, the people here, they are really flexible and agile and fast. It's great. Wow.
Yeah, that's great. Adam, go ahead, please.
You're on mute. I think he's talking, but he is on mute.
I think he has already written something in chat. I can take it from that point. Will in future warehouse are made above land? Okay, that was the question we have already answered.
Okay.
Another question is about the hard rising cost for staff. What is the most important ability should we learn to fit in those jobs? So extra experiences.
Experiences to fit those jobs which are missing.
Yep, exactly.
Studying logistics, being well trained there. Yes, I think that's really the base, because I'm so convinced that no one who studied logistics in nowadays will have a problem to find a job. And on the other hand, if you find a job, no one who wants to make career, who wants to take over responsibility, or everyone who has who fits these criteria will make career in logistics. That's great in that industry. If you want to take over responsibility, you will get it, and you have opportunities to make your career really fast. And for sure, there are things you can't study. This is be able to be a team worker. Be creative. Say what you think or what you have in mind. Do not think only in problems, deliver solutions if you see problems, all those things, but they finally are trained on the job.
Yes, thank you so much, Frauke. Are there any questions? Use your last chance, as long as we have Frauke with us. Could you give any suggestions for improving the resilience of urban logistics infrastructure systems in the face of climate change challenges? From Christina.
So you mean improvements to protect us against those climate change effects on supply chains, right?
I think so, because I would also translate it into climate resilience.
Yeah, right. So I think basic homework to protect us and to be climate resilient is to make your homework and define the right processes and to make them transparent to everyone, because this is always the challenge. If we have a, how do you call it? If we have, let's say, some natural catastrophes in China, it has effects to the whole supply chain until this product is delivered to Hamburg or to Germany or somewhere, which I mean is everything is connected. But if I have a transparent process and I know if we have a natural disaster at a certain place in China and I've managed everything transparently, I can see what effects will be there. I see that because it's transparent and I know which stakeholders are working together. And this is the key to be resilient. because then I can use maybe another supply chain. I can switch suppliers, could be the case. Yeah? So I think one major key to resilience is to be flexible in your processes, to be able to see that there is, or to even foresee that there could be a natural catastrophe even before it really happens. Because we collect all data, and if we put those data together, we can see, hey, there are some criteria and they are not put together, so the risk is high that there will happen something in the next days. And so we are not blind. We are not blind if we are really able to collect the data and to validate those data. So yeah, finally, my answer is it's all about the right processes, flexible processes, transparent processes, and all stakeholders in the process being aware what is the next step and who is the customer of them in their process.
Thank you so much. And indeed, a very good example about the flexibility is that sustainability and climate resilience in logistics might be contradictory. And that good example is actually if we put parcels on the rail, and this is going to be our next session, then it might be more sustainable. However, as we know, and as Frauke said, flexibility is everything about innovation and also resilience. It is not the case with the railway, right? It is, as said, sustainable, but infrastructure is not that agile, unfortunately. So those are the two coins of the sustainability and climate resilience, I would say. So, okay, thank you, Frauke, very much for your very interesting and motivating lecture. And sorry for any inconvenience with the agenda. We thank you very much also for your flexibility. And yeah, I hope to talk to you soon in other contexts. Thank you. Enjoy your day.
Thank you for inviting me. Have a good session. Have good discussions and creative ideas. Take care to all of you. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Okay. Thank you, everybody. We have already the next presenter, Cyril, with us because we are behind the schedule, as said. But I would like very much to take the pause, Cyril, if it's not very, very bad for you to be a little bit later. I would suggest to take the pause because we have been so much overloaded with very much interesting information, and therefore we need coffee. Cyril, what do you say?
Absolutely. Just the people need to promise that they come back.
Yeah, sure. They're obliged to come back.
Right.
Yeah,
no,
thank
totally
you, Cyril.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chuck. Talk to you soon. Okay, hello, everybody back. We are punctual. Yeah, and now I would like to present our next speaker, who is going to be Cyril alias. He represents the Development Center for Ship Technology and Transport Systems. And today he is going to talk about the future logistics and distribution concepts of coastal cities using multi-use floating offshore structures. Who is Cyril? Cyril is he is holding logistics management and engineering degrees, has a track record in academic research and worked in several national and international research projects, including European Union funded projects for nearly a decade before joining DST, which is the Development Center for Ship Technology and Transport Systems. He is the head of the Department of Logistics and Transportation, starting from 2019. At DST, where he takes responsibility for various projects on national and international level related to inland waterway transportation and port logistics. He is a broad member of the Center of Logistics and Traffic with us, and we are very happy for having him with us. He's an expert in logistics, distribution and production systems, simulation techniques, logistics, information systems, digitization, supply chain management, distribution network, transport logistics, and port operations. So with him, we are starting about the port operations. So you can start sharing your screen, and we are very much delighted for having you with us.
Thank you very much for the kind words. I didn't know that I'm obviously capable of so many things. Hello everyone. Welcome to this talk with the title Future Logistics and Distribution Concepts of Coastal Cities Using Multi-Use Floating Offshore Structures. It's not the handiest title of the world, but there's something that we mean behind that. Well, first of all, thank you for the introduction. A couple of words from my side. As Annie was already mentioning, we're a ship technology institute. Having said that, it's not only about ships, but also about offshore structures. So anything that is floating or running on water is a part of our research. And I have the honor to look out for business cases. Who needs what? I mean, designing a vessel is one thing, but making it useful in business terms is yet another task, and that's part of our research. So from my side and also from my team. Today, I'd like to go deeper into the applicability of floating infrastructures. So get into that, what that means as a solution to future problems. I'll try to click on my slide and yeah, there you see. I'll skip this just to give you a background information. Why did we start research on this? There is a huge amount of the global population living in coastal areas, directly at the seafront, but also within reach for waves and for increasing sea levels. So we see some sort of congestion on different levels, by the way, in the metropolitan areas along the coasts. We as an institute to see that mostly in that context of ports not being able to expand because the city surrounding them is already given. So there is a certain level of conflict between the city with its inhabitants and the port with its stakeholders that are fighting for the rest of space that might be left, which is hardly the case. So we have a dense population situation there. And then at the same time, we see that activity at sea is growing, increasing. We see energy, I mean, traditionally we see energy harvesting in the sea, think of oil platforms or the like, but also increasingly green energy harvesting, be it wave conversion, be it wind energy. And I even saw some solar platforms trying to harvest solar energy on the sea. I don't know where that ends, but still the sea as an energy source or the energy location is well known. Same applies to transport hubs. I don't know who of you is frequently in Hong Kong or in Singapore, but also here in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Our Dutch colleagues might not like that term, but basically half of their port is not floating, but out in the sea. It's a Dutch technology to grab land from the sea and build a port, and that they can export that principle these days. Then next application is living in tourism. So people are going out there. I'm not talking about the big cruise ships that can be found anywhere in the Caribbean and in the Gulf Coast, or here in the Mediterranean Sea in Europe and Northern Africa. But also living in terms of oil platform staff or other remote areas that need people working there. So it is maybe not the most popular thing to do, but it's not quite entirely new. And finally, think of countries like Norway on the one side, or Vietnam and Cambodia on the other. Aquaculture and farming is in different kinds, by the way. quite common. You see fish farms, you see algae, you see all kinds of farming on the water. So the sea is a business location. And now the idea is to combine functions of these business of this business use and create infrastructure for that. That's the background. A couple of years ago, first of all, so we see that there is a need for affordable and flexible space at sea in order to increase activities without the conflict with the population that we frequently see in these coastal areas. So that's the motivation. And the motivation is also acknowledged by the European Commission. A couple of years ago, they launched a research call, which was called Multi-Use of the Oceans, Marine Space, Offshore and Nearshore Enabling Technologies. And those technologies, you can see that excerpt of that call was about bringing a sufficiently mature technology into play, especially hydrodynamically optimized and researched regarding their business applicability. And we were part of that team. The idea here was then to tackle the challenges, how to combine activities regarding on the respective location of such a platform. So it is a platform solution that we're thinking of. How to reduce cost, how to reduce risks. I mean, not just the technical risks, but also the business risks, and how to look at the entire scope of this solution. So the technical structures, the flexibility, and also the robustness, technical robustness of this solution. How to pilot demonstrate them, how to find co-located maritime activities. So as I said, there is already something going on at the sea. So how to link to that, how to address health and safety issues. Think of people living on these platforms. There might be all kinds of physiological and psychological issues popping up. And of course, environmental and economic viability issues that needs to be acknowledged decently. So that was the idea, and the final goal was try to prove the technical feasibility and increase the economic viability, basically, and also to have a certain level of acceptance by possible users. So this is the basic setting, and our response was to find some, let's say, visionary people. You see here a picture from the Dutch Marine Institute, Marin, and a test installation that they had in their test basin. So the idea is to provide sustainable and affordable workspace at sea. This is not purely for leisure, although housing is one of the topics I have been mentioning before. So this is about business use of spaces at sea, and that to be understood as a direct response to increasing sea levels. So if people get homeless due to climate issues, but also in order to make new spaces available as old ones are decaying or becoming not usable anymore, then these kind of locations might be an option. That was the basic setting, as I said. Look at the second line here. The idea is not to develop, well, let's say, customized solutions only, but to develop a standardized solution that is modular, that you can extend by need, and also with a certain level of cost efficiency, so that we have standard modules that you put together. For example, those triangles that you can see on the picture, but it could also be all squares or other forms, but that allow a certain flexibility in building these platforms and also taking different forms. And of course, also a low ecological impact is important. These days, you would not be able to deploy anything without this very severe prerequisite. This is an overview of the team. You can see different kinds of players. I mean, research institutions mainly, universities from Germany, from Hamburg, from Duisburg, from Rostock, but also from the Netherlands and TU Delft and Wageningen and Marin from Austria. So all kinds of people. Interestingly, not only engineers. That's important to say. We had psychologists with us, of course, a bunch of business people doing the business research. We had design studios, just like Water Studio and Blue Water, that took a look at how to design these platforms. I mean, I don't know how many of you would like to stay on an oil platform. It's not the nicest place to stay, to be honest. But if you want to create a space where people want to stay, want to spend their time, then it has to have a certain quality, level of quality of space there. So, and in the project, it was a research project of 3 years. We looked at different use patterns of these platforms. So first of all, you see the blue part is the business case and the market uptake, important issues. As I said, also the health, safety, and environmental impact that needs to be taken care of course. Also the shape and the health forces, so kinematic issues, technical issues here, also how to install them, how to monitor them, overhaul and maintenance here. So a lot of, let's say, basic management issues of the platform, but more importantly, or let's say equally importantly, but more in the focus of the potential user, is the different streams of usage. You can see an energy hub as one option how to use these platforms. You can see a living space, as I said, something like a remote island, a farming space. So you have, let's say, fish farms or all kinds of aquaculture being collected on these platforms. And of course, it could also be an offshore port terminal. So these were the 4 basic use patterns or use scenarios we thought of. And then the basic or the underlying question was where to deploy what. So these are possible patterns. You might already see that when you want to create an energy platform that has completely different conditions to be fulfilled than if you want to build a transport hub or a logistics hub. Not only on the sea, even on the land sites, you would have the same problem, but on the sea, it's even more the case. So that was a difficult question to answer, especially when you consider the different locations. Since it was a European project, we looked mainly at European locations. Interestingly, during the project and especially afterwards, we got quite a number of requests for presentation, for detailed demonstration from outside Europe, starting with Indonesia and Ecuador and Peru, but also other parts of the world where sea level issues obviously are a problem. So it's a kind of long-term approach to address these topics. So the idea then here, as I said, is to build a modular island. I said that already. From a technical point of view, the mooring design, so how to bring these modules together and how to make them stick together, even under strong wave forces, is an important issue. Might be a technical detail to some, but I can tell you that this needs specific care and careful calculations to make this thing work, even under higher pressure. Think of high waves, think of tsunamis, or even all kinds of winds. And there's a lot of forces that can influence the stability of this platform that need to be taken into consideration. Of course, also not only the standard case, but also the accident case. So what happens if, I don't know, if a certain amount of cargo is dropped too quickly onto the platform? What happens if an ocean-going vessel hits that platform, what happens to, and so we had a lot of different scenarios that we needed to find solutions to, since it's a place where people are supposed to live. So it's the work and live area. It needs to be safe, otherwise you will never get that acceptance, and I tried to focus on that acceptance earlier. And also, of course, how to supply these platforms, not only from a people's perspective, so how to bring them food and water, how to do all kinds of services to them, but also technically how to maintain, how to deal with power outages, with well, maintenance issues, how to repair things, and how much to store on the platform, how much to store ashore, and bring them with feeder vessels or feeder services. So there's all kinds of issues that we tackled here. And in the end, of course, hydrodynamically, looking at the optimal shapes. And as I said, that strongly depends on the respective geographical location. So there's not one size fits all pattern here. If you want to deploy something in south of Marseille in France, that platform might entirely look different than a platform next to Antwerp in Belgium, which were, by the way, two of the 4 locations we took a look at. The Antwerp location was a location for, I'll just skip back here, was a location both for transport logistics and for living at sea, whereas the Marseille location in France was an energy hub location for wave conversion, and not wind, and so it's about wave energy here, and farming. So just 2 of the 4 examples, but to create a platform that should be serving as an outer terminal of the port of Antwerp, Europe's 2nd biggest port, by the way, and a living place is quite a challenge. I mean, I don't know how many of you really want to see them living on a port. I mean, passing by a port is something different, or taking some photos of at a port is nice, but living there and hearing the containers being dropped off and the vessels calling at a port, yeah, I guess after 2 days, people are fed up. So there's a huge level of requirements that need to be matched, right? We talked to the port of Antwerp, because Antwerp is one of those ports in Europe that is simply congested and full of cargo. So basically, they're very interested in looking at these concepts. Having said that, I mean, the cargo is not destined to the port itself. I mean, there are hinterland locations that these containers and other cargo should go to. So how to get them off the platform is another question that we needed to take a look at. And that's something, I'll skip this here, that was also something that we needed to look at. As I said, the supply question for the living platform is equally important as the hinterland connection of such a platform then to the rest of the continent, and which was also then addressed by us. And we also talked with the people of the port of Antwerp, so they were part of like 3 or 4 workshops where their technical people were looking at special vessels, inland going and sea-going inland vessels, that's the correct term. So inland vessels that were able to, enter the high sea up to a certain distance. We made use of that concept to make sure that the containers get also off the platform. Here you can see some different scenarios of the application design. So we have the wind farm here. In that case, that is feeding the electricity to a storage facility, and also exporting it via cable. But it could also serve the self-sufficient supply of the platform itself, by the way, which was also an option. For the wind, for the farming case, of course, there's also further processing plant on the platform. But it could also be that it's, I mean, that's the factory symbol here, but also after processing, also making it ready for further export. So the containers then exporting that containers to further destinations. So these products would never see land until they reach the final destination. And third scenario that we looked deeper into, that was the Antwerp case, as I said, that we have a larger platform for different kinds of cargo handling, cargo storage, as a part of an extended terminal vision of the port of Antwerp. And you can also see, I don't know if it becomes clear from the picture, that the sea-going vessels are at one side, the the inland vessels and the feeder vessels are at the other side. So there's a clear geographical separation, so that accidents and congestion reasons in the actual port of Antwerp can be avoided here at the platform. This is just meant as a as an impulse to how future living and working concepts could look like. What you can see here is the demonstrator. There was a huge demonstrator workshop in Wageningen in the Netherlands, where they showed this not only from the technical perspective, but also the related business cases. For each of the business cases, we had to look at, as I said, the viability. Is it possible at all? I mean, just from technical point of view, then also the location to deploy a certain type of platform, and I also see how the cost of building the platform, maintaining the platform, and running the platform stands in contrast to the expected revenues, all based on assumptions, of course. But these combinations were not easy to find, because we also have to look at the potential growth. It's not a silo application, but this combinations made it even more complex. But I think we found existing, we generated some good results for the research. And you can see in the current European Commission research program, dedicated program for offshore application. So this is a sector that the European Union will focus on even more, and these results and even the business plans are then to be expanded and extended to further requirements and further use case patterns. Well, in the end, generating acceptance for these kind of solutions is one thing. I mean, one thing is clear at the moment: people would not see themselves living on those platforms, but same applies to living or even visiting the moon. And still, guys in California obviously do a little bit of a space race these days. So, there are pioneers obviously that can think of new solutions, and these platforms belong to those solutions. And we were able, and we're still able to show the demonstrability of these solutions, and that they are technically feasible, and under circumstances that are quite narrow these days, that's true, also economically viable. Right. I would stop here, as I probably exceeded all my time limits. I'm sorry for that, but open for questions.
Thank you very much, Cyril. Are there any questions from the audience? I know Dilek is already very nervous because I know Alexander Gaba is already with us, having some only 25 minutes, but still I would like still to give the word to our participants, mentioning the fact, Cyril, really, I'm very much impressed. Yesterday I have visited the Museum Futurium and in Berlin, and it was fascinating to see that the future of our urban systems are floating platforms. Yeah. I was so much interested in this because I know what you are doing, and indeed I'm very much interested in this kind of food farms and also living spaces on the floating platforms. So are there any questions? What to do if the people who have their houses by the shore do not want to leave their homes, despite knowing about the risk of the sea rising level? Also, the government gives them other places to live, but the citizens do not want it.
Yeah.
From Erika.
a good question, and also more a social question, I think, because there's a lot linked to that question, I believe. I mean, displacement is always a painful thing, even on a subjective level. So it can only work, in my opinion at least, only work with persuasion and convincement, that you make people understand that living along the sea, at least in some regions of the world, and probably with an increasing number in the next years, is a dangerous thing to do. So, you know, I know that traditionally human beings like to be at the sea, work with the sea, on the sea, but still increasingly, and we can see that in many parts of the world, that the sea becomes a threat to the inhabitants next to it, and that will probably not decline in the next years. Yeah. So
giving financial incentives.
Yeah, for example, but you know, it should work without financial incentives. I mean, being alive is an incentive enough, I believe. But,
yeah. Okay, thank you, Cyril. We will take one last question from Neil. Neil, you have raised your hand. Go ahead, please.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you. My question is, I guess it would be related to the previous question. Like, if having space at sea, so putting more objects or floating objects in the sea would somewhat displace more water or increase the water level or seawater level. So somewhere around the world, maybe in a small scale, the effect wouldn't be that much. But if most countries would be implementing this, getting more space on the sea, then somewhere around the world, somehow some cities might sink or be, and so it's like we're getting more space at sea, but somehow we're also losing some space or land space. So is there some research on this? And also, if we it's okay with the transportation logistics, floating vessels doing the logistics, but getting more warehouses, islands in the sea, will it not affect the marine habitat or marine environment?
Yeah. Well, two nice questions, very clever questions actually. The first one, I think I can address that quite easily, because I started with the assumption that we have already rising sea levels. So sorry for my friends in Amsterdam, but it looks very dull in the future. I mean, you know, they will have a problem anyway, whether we build these platforms or not. Rising sea levels is probably a fact. So that is only I mean, these platforms are a possible reaction to this issue. Yes, you're right. I mean, right, just from water science level, yes, it's right. Of course, if you put something into water, the water level rises. So if you put everywhere these along the seaside these platforms, you might probably see some minor increase in the sea levels, but that wouldn't probably be the decisive factor where the people would get displaced. So I don't see that as an issue, although you're right. I see the issue already way before. The same, the other thing is that issue with the marine habitat. Of course, we looked at locations that do not touch any specially protected areas. I mean, of course, any involvement or installation in the sea has an impact. I mean, let's face it. So this is about a pro and con weighing thing. Is the cost of entering the habitat higher than saving the lives of people that otherwise would just have a problem? I mean, we're not just talking about the moderately densely populated countries. We're also talking about overpopulated countries. As I said, the first interest request came from Indonesia, and that's not a widely like scarcely populated country. It's full of people there. So if you already lose possible living and working space in such a country, it has social impact. And a tremendous social impact, to be honest. So yes, there is an issue. I mean, you should choose these locations wisely, for sure. But you know, with that in mind, it is possible to deploy these platforms with minimum invasion of the nature.
Thank you so much, Cyril. Fascinating topic. We can talk about it for hours, but still we have to watch our time. Thanks a lot. And by the way, two participants or our participants have already found a name for your baby, and that's called Noah Arch, or Island of Noah, which is not too bad. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. And
thank you.
If you would stop sharing, we will move forward with our agenda, and we still stay with ship and coastal areas. Now we will move to Port of the Duisburg. The title is Our Role in a Rapidly Changing Environment. We are very much delighted to have Alexander Garber from the Duisport, and Alexander is the Managing Director of the Starport GmbH in Duisburg since November 2021 and Deputy Head of the Corporate Development and Strategy Department in Duisburg Harbor since 2019. In this role, he is in charge of all sustainability projects in Duisburg, the Project Management Office, and all activities of Duisburg in Belarus as well. In addition to investigating the sustainability of green fuels in port operations, he is investigating various possibilities for decentralized energy supply in the port area and is responsible for the port strategic orientation with regard to future activities in the hydrogen sector. Alexander received his Master of Sciences degree in Business Administration at Heinrich-Heine University in Düsseldorf, and in previous positions, he was in charge of the implementation and development of new industry groups for a worldwide law company and the implementation of optimal purchasing strategies for different product groups in a leading procurement and supply chain consulting company. Alexander, we are very much delighted for having you with us, and take your time, enjoy the conversation.
Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear and see me.
Yes, perfectly fine.
That's great. So thank you for having me. Thank you for the great introduction. I'll share my screen real quick, and then I'll jump right into the presentation I prepared for all of you. And I also try to gain some time that you kind of meet your schedule again, but of course I will not run too much through the presentation. So here we go. It's what Cyril just talked about is basically also one factor that is targeting us as a port quite enormously. And when I talk about the changing market environment, it's more or less the environment that leads to a change in the port. So what you see here is a picture, and it shows quite well what we earn money with right now. And I think it will be also part of our business in the future, of course. And this is handling of containers. But this will definitely not change, but will definitely be added by some other products in the future, because the whole market in terms of what is going to be transported will change enormously. And this will affect the port on a very deep level. But before I jump right into that topic, just a couple of words to the port. I will not talk a lot about numbers and stuff like that, but so you just get a good feeling. The port itself is more than 300 years old. We are a public-owned company, so 2/3 of the shares are owned by the state of NRW. 1/3 is owned by the city of Duisburg. We are a public company at the end of, but we always like to say that we run ourselves as a private company. So we're not we're focused on, of course, earning money and not kind of keep the system as it is. Duisburg itself is located in a very good position. It's at the end, it's a sweet spot of logistics. It's also a reason why we are so successful. It's not because we are so great, but of course the River Rhine and the Autobahn and the rail connection helps us to be where we are. But at the end, of course, we try our best to be the best port possible in the hinterland. A couple of words was what makes us different compared to other ports. So normally when you talk about a port, most of the ports in the world are only landlords. So they provide infra and superstructure, they lease land to companies, and they earn money by the rent they get. That's pretty much it. This is a great way of earning money because it's quite simple for a port that is set in terms of location geographically. So if you take a seaport, it's just set by nature because ships can go there, not a lot of options. If you are a port in the hinterland, you're normally not set, because on the River Rhine, we have plenty of ports. We have plenty of places with good infrastructure. But if you want to become the biggest port, the best port, whatever, you need to offer more to your clients. And we started 20 years ago to add value-added services that clients, if they want, they do not get a piece of land, but they also get agency services, so transportation services, they get consultancy, they get industrial packaging services, we can do contract logistics, and this is how the company grew from becoming just a port and a full service logistic provider, which is always quite difficult because we are always on the edge to compete with our clients on the infrastructure part. So it's always quite a balance what we do, because we do not want to compete with our client, because at the end, the clients in the infrastructure part, they pay the bills at the end. So it's always a balance. And right now, I want to move to the point I was talking about, how the environmental market is changing in the way we think, or the way we work in the future, and the way we talk about the port. So this is a slide I normally show to show people, oh, look how great we are. We have great numbers. We have more than 290 million of revenues. We handle more than 4 million TEUs. We have thousands and thousands of ships and trains. And those numbers, they're great, of course. They're great for the port of Duisburg. They're great for Duisburg. They're great in general for logistics. But those numbers, if you look in the future, they matter, but they are not that important as they used to be. And this is why I like to show this slide, because what you see right here shows quite simple why those numbers are not so important. Because in the port, we handle those 4 million TEUs, but we also handle 100 million tons of goods in general. And the biggest part of that 130 million tons is coal and liquids. Liquids, especially diesel and gasoline. Those two pieces, they will disappear. Those 10 million tons of coal, they don't exist at all anymore. We are down to 2 million, something like that. And the amount of liquids, especially diesel and gasoline, they will go down in the future as well. And this leads to a completely different way we need to think about volumes, and we need to position ourselves totally different. So we used to be the biggest coal handling port in the hinterland for many, many, many years. But this coal island you see right here, it doesn't exist anymore. So there is no coal on this island. We moved the tiny bits of coal we have to another part of the port because we decided that we need to use this part differently because there's just no volume. And then let me switch to why we need to think differently. And why we need to think differently is basically based on the whole sustainability environmental topics we are facing right now. And we as a port, we have decided 2 years ago that we need to set up more or less pillars we want to focus on for the future, that kind of lead the way for the port to a better, more integrated future for the port. And we have pillars that are based on our daily business. 2 pillars of them that you see right here. So I just switch to the next slide, shows quite better. We have 4 pillars we are focusing on. First one is modal shift. Modal shift is daily basis for a port. Every port is focusing on modal shift, increasing efficiency, being more digital, blah, 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 all those points. Everyone knows them more or less. But this is daily business. And then we have using of resources, also daily business, like no brownfield development, no plastic packaging, all those things we all are focusing on. And then we have those 2 pieces in the middle. 5 years ago, a port would never care about energy supply and noise, pollution, whatever. Because at the end, oh yeah, we have a port, we have plenty of trucks, so we're dirty. energy supply. Oh, we have a grid connection. That's fine. We do not need to talk about that at all. And right now we have the solution. We have the problem, energy supply. You cannot get all the energy you need everywhere because the grid is not capable of delivering enough energy everywhere. Of course, you have pieces where it's possible, but not everywhere. So you need to talk about decentralized energy supply. You need to talk about CHPs you want to use because you never thought about using CHP in the port because you had a grid. So right now you talk about gas CHPs, hydrogen CHPs, all those things that you never thought about. And then you move to air, noise, and climate. And we are all facing those issues. But right now, like all the stakeholders, they are shouting quite loudly, you need to do something. And for us as a port, it's always, it's a fight because we say, look, guys, it's not our trucks we have in the port, so we do not have any influence on what when they come to us or what they do. But people don't care. They just see the port and say, those trucks come to the port, make sure you make something about it. So we need to look on infrastructure. We need to change the infrastructure. We need to kind of get a better feeling for the clients. How can we make sure that they don't use trucks for last mile or don't use big trucks for last mile and switch to green trucks? It's not only about providing infrastructure, but it's also about making sure that the supply chain works at the end. Because of course we can say no dirty trucks in the port, but this will lead to a transition of trucks just to another city. So the effect will be basically zero in terms of CO2 emissions, in terms of climate effect. So we need to make sure that we find more or less a good approach, that we stay the biggest inland port, but become greener than the others. It's not that simple. And let me get back to what I was talking about before, the change in terms of products we handle in the port. I was talking about coal. I was talking about green fuels and the reduction of those volumes. And of course, we realized many years ago that we need to find new products we want to focus on. For most of the years, the product we were focusing on were containers. So we had a growing demand of containers we had in the port. Everything was great, but there is a limit for containers. The container market will not grow like it used to be in the past. So we started to kind of ask us the question, like, what is the product of the future that we, not only as a port, but also as the area, want to focus on? And there are several. So there are the product batteries, recycling of batteries, because at the end, everything is run by batteries right now. So you have the whole topic of recycling, storage of batteries. But then, of course, there's the whole topic of hydrogen. We all know the topic hydrogen. It's maybe right now the most hyped topic, not only in logistics, but basically everywhere. Everyone is talking about hydrogen, importing, transporting, using. It's basically everywhere. Sometimes it's a little bit annoying, I can tell you quite honestly, but it is quite important at the end, because in most pieces, especially in industry and logistics, there is right now no other way than to switch to hydrogen. If it's the best way, I will not judge it, but it's the only way we have, because there's basically no other technology available right now. Who knows what will be in 10 years, but so far, everyone is focusing on that part. So we announced a year ago a goal. We announced a goal that we want to become the central hub for hydrogen, ammonia, methanol in the hinterland. And the reason why we announced it is quite simple, because we are the biggest inland port in Europe. So it's basically set by nature that we want to become the central hub. But at the end, it's for hinterland port. It's always quite difficult to announce becoming central hub, because we have to import everything from the seaports to Duisburg and then deliver it to the clients around us. But at the end, if you look on the whole supply chain market right now, containers or classical gasoline, it's the same way. So at the end, you need a hinterland hub to do the last mile or last couple of miles delivery. And the supply chain for hydrogen is basically set. So it's the way what you see, it will be like that, maybe with some little changes, but at the end, the biggest chunks of hydrogen will be produced somewhere else, not in Germany, more or less also not in Europe. They will be imported in the beginning by ship, in the future hopefully by pipeline. Well, they'll be forwarded, and then you have the whole bits and pieces you see on the right, storage, cracker, handling, and stuff like that. But of course, it's always quite easy for a port to say, I want to become something. And if you shout loud enough, people might believe it, but at the end, it doesn't lead to anything. So we've decided that if we want to become the central hub I was talking about, we need to do things we never did before. So we need to jump into research projects that are not focusing on logistics or handling approaches or becoming more digital or more efficient or whatever. We need to jump into projects that focus on hydrogen demand. Because if we want to become a hub, we need demand in a closed area, because if you have demand, people are willing to build storage facilities because you want to deliver pretty fast, because there's a high back and forth in terms of volume. So we started to jump into the projects that are focusing on mobility, because at the end, if you look on the time frame of implementation of hydrogen, the first few steps or the first demand will be driven by mobility. The big demand will be driven by industry, but this is like midterm and not very in the short term. So we jumped into research projects focusing on barge. It's a project called Rhine, focusing on the infrastructure for ships, focusing on technology sides. How can a ship be transformed, be retrofitted for using hydrogen? We started the study to find out if we can run our own locomotives. We have the port on hydrogen. We wanted to see how is the whole energy supply if you run a locomotive, which is capable of running 1,600 kilowatts in terms of energy. How often do you need them? How does a locomotive has to look like if you run it on hydrogen? How many batteries you need? Because those questions, no one was talking about them, because normally you could just say, oh, I have a locomotive. If you put enough diesel in it, you can run it basically 24/7 on the highest energy possible. With a hydrogen locomotive, this is basically not possible, because no one is willing to build a locomotive with 1,600 kilowatts of fuel cell power. I think there are better ways to waste money. And the other part is just trucks, because at the end, there is no other way right now than running hydrogen trucks. And since we have, I would say, basically every day, over 3,000 trucks in the port area in general, this number shows quite well why we need to do something there. So, and if we increase that demand, we can achieve the goal becoming the central hub. And all those topics, they are not quick wins, because if you look on the market, when are the products available, when is hydrogen available on a fair price, and if you look on the politics, it needs to be green, so it gets even more expensive, and even further in the future. All those steps we take right now, they focus on things we want to achieve in 24, 25, 26, and even further. But if we do not do it right now and start to jump into those projects, we will be just a port that is, I don't know, maybe has a hydrogen filling station. That's pretty much it. So becoming a hub and having the volume in the port requires those steps. And at the end, I want to show you something which is also driven by the whole change in terms of how the energy market is changing. And I was talking in the beginning, I was talking about grid connection and how normally a port is using the grid. So normally we just have a basic grid connection, and if we build something new, and what you see here is the coal island I was talking about. And on the coal island, we're going to build, or we are already in the process of building, the biggest inland terminal basically in Europe. So it's a terminal that is capable of handling 1 million TEUs per year. And we are planning to build this terminal as a classical terminal, grid connection, only cranes, 4 megawatts of energy demand, basically stupid energy use, a lot of peaks when you lift a container. And then we start to think about, okay, 4 megawatts, and the city of Duisburg, or the Stadtwerke, so the grid provider said, okay, we can provide 4 megawatts, but it's pretty tight if you use all 8 cranes you have in the terminal, and you lift all at once. There will be quite a hard challenge for the grid. So we started to think about what can we do better, and we firstly just thought about, oh, let's do peak shaving and just put some batteries on the terminal and just do peak shaving. Pretty stupid, but that was the first approach. But then we said, okay, if we start to do peak shaving, why don't we produce the energy that we need for peak shaving ourselves and just build photovoltaic systems on the roof and on the free space we have. But then we realized, oh, if we just build photovoltaic, it's just 1.5 megawatts, but in general, we need more, because if those trains start to lift and you have those peaks, you need way more energy to fill into the storage. So we thought about a gas CHP. And pretty fast, we just came from a gas CHP. Why don't we do something better? Instead of using gas, which isn't green, let's have an H2 CHP in the terminal and fuel cells. And then we just combined photovoltaic system, CHP, fuel cell, that in total are capable of running the system or the whole terminal totally autonomous off grid. Of course, the terminal will have a grid connection as a backfall scenario, but at the end, it's capable of being run off grid. And the whole system is combined, or is more or less is laying on a smart microgrid. So there is an intelligence behind it that is bringing together all the energy providing pieces and all the energy using pieces, making sure that energy is used in the most efficient way. And maybe the most important part, because we are in a very fast changing world in terms of energy providing to the market, it will also be connected to the quarters around. So it's not like a solution only for the terminal, but we also focus on how can we use what we have in the port or in this area to bring it back to the other sectors, because at the end, we talk about sector coupling, we have to bring pieces together. So we're going to use the heat that CHP is providing to the living quarter, to the industry quarter around. We're going to use energy we might have in peaks that we do not use because the storage might be full. It will be used locally. We are not going to put it back into the grid. We're going to use it locally into the quarters around, because we believe at the end that those systems, those sector coupled systems, will be in the future. You will not produce energy for yourself. You will produce energy and heat for a group of sectors around. Because at the end, if we talk about decentralized energy supply and green energy, you will become there will be a grid issue in the future. So you need to think not for yourself, but for quarters, for bigger pieces of land and ground, for different players, to find a good solution that we all benefit if you produce somewhere this decentralized energy. Thank you so much. Almost on time.
Thank you so much, Alexander. It was really fascinating to see once again how the sectors are merging together, like logistics and energy sectors. We have started with that during the last session. And also today we have been discussing with Frauke what are the next steps or the future of the logistics. And she said also the ultimate sentence, what we also believe in the Center of Logistics and Traffic, and that's that the logistic is going to take the integrator role along the entire supply chain, which you have shown us perfectly in your presentation. Thank you so much. Are there any questions from the participants? Take your chance as long as we have Alexander with us. I know it's a little bit difficult to digest so much information coming in, but hydrogen indeed is going to be the future, probably.
If you like, you can send me your questions by mail.
Okay.
So you can, if you like, you can share my contact information. If people have questions, just send me by mail afterwards. So no worries.
Thank you very much, Alexander. We are gathering indeed all the questions coming in the chat, and we will save those sending to you. We have just quick, probably 2 questions if you have
yes, of course,
time. Of course. How would the strategies change in vulnerable regions? The question.
Oh, that's a good question, because at the end, those vulnerable regions, they face the same challenges. It doesn't matter if it's a vulnerable region or not. because at the end we all need to convert, to become more efficient, to become more digital, cleaner. It's at the end it's basically a question of money, quite simple. It costs quite a lot what we all do, not only us as a board, but the whole energy transition is very, very cost intensive. So it's either about funding, so local funding if government locally can afford, or it's either about basically funding provided by the wealthier countries to make sure that at the end it's quite simple. If only Germany starts to move towards a green solution or becoming CO2 free or carbon free, whatever, the effect is basically not measurable. So like we can do it on our own, but there's no reason to do that. So it's a cooperation thing at the end.
Yes, there is another question about the purity of hydrogen. I suppose it's about the energy question, how you get the hydrogen.
We'd like to produce it ourselves, but it's not possible in the hinterland. Like producing hydrogen locally, we can do it using energy from the grid. In terms of efficiency, it might be the worst thing to do. So at the end, you will have some decentralized production parts, but at the end you will import it from countries where you have basically an overflow of energy, sun or wind, because you just so the only reason to use hydrogen at the end is if you use energy to produce hydrogen that you would normally not produce. So you need to produce energy somewhere where you normally wouldn't do anything, and use that energy that is basically too much on the market to produce hydrogen. And in Germany, it needs to be imported because maybe you have some bits and pieces in Hamburg or whatever. We have wind parks, but at the end, it's going to be imported. Like I would say the first couple of years, we will still stick to gray, and blue, and pink, and whatever colored hydrogen, because there's just not enough green hydrogen around. But yeah.
Yes, I would actually stop the conversation, but because I know that Martina Neyman is there, CFO of the DAAD Cargo. Sorry, Martina, but I would like to take the very last question because it's coming just from the deep bottom of my heart as well. The question is, how can sea logistics connect with land logistics? Because that was going to be the question we have addressed in European Union call. That's why I would like to ask this question.
Okay, maybe a question back. Like, what do you mean by sea logistics and land logistics? So
yeah,
you mean like barge and
harbor. It's about harbor role as an integrator between global supply chains and very last mile logistics.
So I think at the end, the harbors need to make sure that they have the infrastructure that is required to have green logistics on land. And if you it's pretty tough to answer, because the effect of sea logistics on land logistics, or the intersection they have, is basically not like really to grab, because like if you have a delivery by a huge seagoing vessel in a seaport, and then there's a transition to truck, like what is the effect? There is just an intersection of modes of transport. But at the end, you need just to make sure that the whole supply chain is green. So you never should look on like what is port and what is logistics and what is transport. But the question is at the end, how do I get my supply chain more efficient and greener? So it's not about sea logistics and port and land and those things, they do not matter. You need to focus on supply chain. And this also is very, very important in terms of like transporting hydrogen. But people talk about importing of hydrogen with a diesel seagoing vessel. So you can use your green hydrogen and put it into a diesel seagoing vessel. Basically, the carbon footprint of green hydrogen will be dirty as peep. Yeah, so you have green land logistics because you have hydrogen trucks, but you transport it with dirty sea logistics. That's I think it's not you cannot focus on different modes of transport. You need to look on the whole supply chain and make sure that you kind of handle that one.
Okay, thank you, Alexander. Before you leave us, because also Martina is there and Cyril is there, probably it's the session where we have the highest density of the external speakers. Probably we could take a moment and take a picture, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Fabian, could you please do it? Martina, could you also please turn on or switch on your camera? It would be fantastic. Great, it works. We see you. And all the others as well, surely. Fabian, would you say when we have to laugh? Cannot laugh, smile the entire time.
So you want me to take a picture of just the external speakers now?
No, as well, you can do it both.
Give me a second. Okay, I think I have all the ones who are still with us here. Okay. Okay, I count down and please smile. Looks great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So we move forward, everybody, and it's my pleasure to go further, dear Martina, so that you know what we have been doing until now. You see on the left-hand side that our host is Columbia University in New York, especially the Center for Sustainable Urban Development. And here it's us from the Center of Logistics and Traffic. Today in the morning, we have been discussing the urban freight in the last mile together with Professor Stefan Spindler from the HU Business School. Then we had ICLEI. We went towards trends and future of logistics with Frauke Heistermann, who is also board of the of our board, but also of BVL. Then we went towards the sea. We had a fascinating floating islands, platforms from Cyril Lalliers Development Center for Ship Technology, and right now you have also got a bit flavor of Alexander Garber from Duisburg Harbor. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to all of you, dear friends, the last presentation on CO2. Just a minute on CO2 neutral logistics growth to potential for rail freight transport, coming from Martina Niemann, who is also the advisory board member of the Center of Logistics and Traffic. Martina Niemann is Chief Financial Officer and member of the board of DB Cargo, which is a German railway cargo since July 2020. The experienced executive with a doctorate in economy. She started her career with venture capital investments before she shifted her focus to the mobility and logistics sector. After joining Lufthansa AG and as investment manager in 1990s, she changed to the German retail group Kaufhof as head of controlling of their travel agency business. Then in the next phase, she held several management positions within Deutsche Bahn until 2011, German Railway, including transforming the internal labor market of the company. From there, she moved into the airline business, first as Chief Human Resource Officer for Air Berlin, and in 2018 to Lufthansa, where she was responsible for the human resources management with Lufthansa Airlines. As you can see, she is the expert in mobility and logistics. And I know also, Martina, you are very much fond of sustainability transformation in the logistics sector. And that's why it's my pleasure to have you here. And we are all in your attention now. Take your chance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to have a few minutes and share some thoughts on CO2 neutral logistics and how that is fostering the growth potential for rail freight transport. And I'll try to share my screen with you. Just a second. Let's see if it works.
We see iPad. Yeah,
you see iPad, that's good. Do you see the screen now?
Yes, Gütergehören auf die Schiene.
Auf die Schiene, yes. Climate-friendly transport. So these are our famous green containers of DB Cargo, because we wanted to have a clear symbol of what we are doing. And therefore, perhaps we can have the next 40 minutes in a way that I have 20 minutes of information for all the audience, and then I'm happy to answer questions or have a discussion on the topic. So to start very generally, if you look at what might happen if we do not stop CO2 emissions, then I think you already know this, obviously, but one has to have it very clearly that it will certainly lead to global warming and climate change. And if we do not change our behavior, we really will endanger life on Earth. And I think many of us had in various countries, but this year also in Germany, some ideas on what can happen if we have increasing temperatures. And on the left-hand side, you see how the temperature increase will proceed if we do nothing. And it could mean that in 50 years, 1/3 of the people on Earth could live in regions with extreme heat, meaning that by 2050, the livelihood of up to 143 million people is threatened by droughts. We already see glaciers melting, coastal regions and cities will be uninhabitable. That means not only in the far end of the globe, but it will be Antwerp, it might be Hamburg, and cities as Shanghai. And scientists have calculated that health costs will be above 2 to 4 billion US dollar annually by rising temperatures. That effect has led to some serious thinking starting in 2019 and 20, also with the German railway system, since in a way, rail freight is on the positive side of that picture. If you see it here, rail can massively contribute to climate protection, as it is the most eco-friendly mode of transport. On the left-hand side, we have compared the CO2 emissions per person. You can see by train, coach, car, or aircraft. You have to know that in Germany, in the railway system, it is 95% running on electric power, and 2/3 of that electric power are generated by renewable resources. So taking wind parks, mostly offshore wind parks, solar energy, and water parks to generate electric energy. And our aim is the target to increase that renewable part of electric energy for powering Deutsche Bahn and DB Cargo to 80% in 2030 and 100% latest 2040. But already now, with about 65% of renewable electric energy, we see on the right-hand side that 1 ton-kilometer of freight transport generates 19 grams of CO2 emissions, whereas when riding a train, whereas the same ton generates 111 grams of CO2 emissions by truck. And you also have heard this summer that the EU has decided to become climate neutral in 2050. Same did Germany, meaning that the CO2 emissions in the transport sector will have to be cut to a large extent. The target is to reduce today's CO2 emission by nearly 50%, minus 48%, until 2030. So the targets are high and also the commitments are high, but now the economies, the industry and the business have to come up with solution how to really cut on transport related CO2 emissions. So we have to come from commitment to action. And you see here, the answer to climate change is decarbonization. And this picture shows you how much is coming from what source in the transport sector. Heavy trucks generate in Germany an adequate to 1/4 of the CO2 emissions in the transport sector. So 25% coming from heavy freight transport. We have 19% coming from vans and inner city traffics, for which we do have electrified solutions meanwhile. There is a small percentage coming from inner German air flights, shipping, and the rail sector. And 60% of all CO2 emissions result from the individual car traffic. Also here, we see solutions to get electric vehicles up and running. But with respect to heavy trucks, we do not yet have a solution at hand. So there are experiments to get trucks on hydrogen as a powering source, or to get the electrified parts of the motorways. But those restructuring efforts are only at the very beginning and have to be boosted up in speed to really be able to sustainably reduce emissions by 2030. This is only 10 years away. The other thing is that DB Cargo, as a railway company, is well positioned for the shift to rail. You can see that one train currently replaces up to 52 trucks. And today we are already replacing 22 million trucks run every year. So DB Cargo is a key to decarbonization. We save across Europe 2 million tons of CO2, replace 22 million trucks run per year, because we have exceptionally lower emission rates, and our on average 3,600 trains per day have a huge impact on climate mitigating measures. And we do this in 17 European countries and on our way to China. What you see also is that our customers are already actively on their way to decarbonize their products and supply chain. We, as a mass freight transporter, have companies like DHL, like Volkswagen, like the big steel producers, car manufacturers, and all other areas, the chemical industry, but also consumer and retail industry, to be part of our customer base. And there are nearly all of those companies have meanwhile put into place programs to reduce their CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions. For example, Lanxess has a program to cut 50% by 2030. Daimler, Mercedes has a program to have a completely CO2 neutral car model. The generations should be, I think they even got the program faster in the last months. DHL wants to achieve 50% improvement of CO2 efficiency by 2025 as does Coca-Cola. And so one can say that even the industries in which this is a huge challenge, like the steel producers, have embarked on a pathway reducing in their production and supply chains the emission of greenhouse gases. And here the huge network of a railway system comes into play. We are offering comprehensive solutions, sitting in 17 countries all across Europe and on our way to China, and taking advantage of this network of rail freight companies and doing the last mile by truck is, for many of the global manufacturers with a production footprint in Europe, one of the choices which they are discussing in this current months. That also leads to a new challenge for us as DB Cargo. We do not want to stay only the railway carrier, which is here in the middle of this graph in the center. We do have the trains and railways in our heart, but we also want to become a terminal operator or an intermodal operator, like you've just heard from Duisburg Harbor, and a rail logistics provider to give the right solutions to production and retail industries to design their supply chains and their transport needs across the goal to reduce CO2 emissions. And to give you one example, how do we prove our competences already? I'd like to shift to a business which is establishing all across Europe just lately, battery logistics for the German, but also for the pan-European automotive industry. And that means that we can connect the battery manufacturers to the existing European automotive rail net. It means that we operate relations between Poland, Germany, the Czech Republic, and also Hungary, and all across over to Spain and UK. That offers the potential to integrate additional European manufacturers, not only with respect to car manufacturers, but also the gigafactories, which are emerging in all European markets. Since batteries are normally quite heavy and they are sensible freight, the rail system is really a good choice for their transport. And DB Cargo is operating logistics centers, rail ports and terminals to serve the transportation needs and give the right solutions. So we just opened a battery center in Bremen for Mercedes, and we do have projects in planning and implementation of additional battery centers for the gigafactories, for example, in Arnstadt and Kaiserslautern. We do strongly think that these logistic services will see a lot of expansion. For example, line feeding of batteries or having them closer to the automotive production line. And I think this will be a market which is in a strong growth period, and this just started this year and will continue to grow due to the fact that we need electrification of 100% of our car portfolio, which is at the moment using German or European roads and highways. And now to give you an idea on what exactly we work on as a company, here you see our main action portfolio, transforming DB Cargo into a climate neutral logistics company. That means we have on the left-hand side activities where we focus on growth and enlarging our market share, the so-called modal shift. That means we have to not only increase our capacities in blockchain, but also be in the market where we serve in the intermodal business, in either the maritime connections from the seaports to hinterland terminals, but also continental terminal access, because I think it is very important that all supply chain solutions are, thought through from both ends, from the consumer end and from the production end. And we can offer the services in between and have embarked on a growth portfolio in this direction. And last but not least, on that side, we see the Trans-Eurasian corridor, rail freight running from China to, for example, Duisport, as one of the main pillars of that development. This was even boosted by the fact that we see a thorough disruption of the high sea vessel transports, and so the operators and producers rethought their supply chains and were actively factoring in the solutions which can be given by rail. The distance between China and Germany, I think might have heard that already today, can be covered in 12 to 16 days. And so with respect to the skyrocketing prices you have for deep sea vessel shipments, it even gets an economic edge to transport goods by train. Last but not least, we have to, as a DB Cargo, to develop the German single wagon load system. This is a kind of, in the last years, a very costly system where you have shunting yards and have single wagons or wagon groups to be transported through a network. It is always complicated to run that network on a sustainable economic level if there's not enough capacity ordered by the customers. Fortunately, we got now strong backwinds so that they are re-entering that network, and we have to digitize the shunting yards, and we have to automate the assets we are running there, the wagons, have to innovate and build our strengths with, for example, digital automated coupling to get more transport on rail. On the same hand, we have also to improve our performance. That means offering customer-centered service design. We need a strong optimization of our service schemes and also an optimization of our capital expenditure, because the strong growth in rail traffic will need a lot of more assets, and therefore we have to come up with innovative ways to source those assets and to finance them, because the investment volumes are huge, and we need to find the best ways to, at the same time, cope with the strong investment necessities and deliver the quality we need in the system. That means we have to fine-tune our products. So we have to use customer-centric production models and an integrated service control so that each and every customer can be sure that his freight is not only tracked, but also has the estimated time of arrival procedures ready so that the services get better than you might remember them from the past times. Last but not least, it is all a European activity. It's not only rail freight in Germany, there the distances are far too short from being productive. So I would say the global goal to shape our ways of transport in a way that we reduce greenhouse gases and CO2 will help us to develop better solutions, and will also be a vast trigger to put more freight on rail. Therefore, I'm happy to discuss what you think about that. And yes, let's open the question round.
Thank you, Martina. Thank you so much for very interesting insights into the big cargo. And indeed, I'm also very much interested and looking forward to taking up your questions here all. So yeah, I think there are getting some questions. One is from Carlos. Carlos, would you like to take the floor and ask your question by yourself? Carlos Grota, you have written a question. If you don't want
Carlos,
to show
you are unmuted. He's speaking, but
okay.
Okay. Excuse me. Martina, can the Deutsche Bahn be profitable and be competitive for short routes, short course routes within urban regions, for instance, runs less than 50 kilometers?
That might be a complicated thing. No, I don't think so. The rail traffic will not be competitive price-wise and with flexibility. So I think the solution is that the last mile or the last 50 kilometers might, in many cases, be the way where we see vans or trucks running. But they then, from a climate perspective, they should run on hydrogen or electric energy. Of course, it's different in those areas where our customers, like big production customers, steel mills, whatever, do have their own rail access. Then, of course, this doesn't matter. But if, let's say, Coca-Cola is shipping their empty bottles to the cleaning facility, or if some retailers are sending their freight between their terminals, then I think in future we will always see the last mile per truck, but not as today, where we see transport by truck like 600, 800 kilometers, or even on cheap labor all across Europe. I think that might change. But you are definitely right when you ask the question: is it all profitable, or is it all economically a good solution to have each and everything to the last mile on rail? There, I would say no. Let's have the last mile by truck.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Martina. There is another question coming about 5G technology. How can it change the rail transport?
I think it's extremely prosperous to rail transport, because we are now experimenting with automated train operations. For example, we have our testing fields in the Netherlands on the B2W line, where the facilities are built in a way that is kind of a safe ground to test it. And that will need a strong communications between the vehicles and the infrastructure guiding the vehicles through. And therefore 5G will give that boost of processing the data we need in a speed we need on that area. It all belongs together. The European train control system, for example, the automated and digital shunting equipment, and the necessary steering equipment to get automated train operations to really increase productivity.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions to Martina? If you don't have any. I will give you a couple of minutes to think about your questions, but my question would be, Martina, what do you think? What is the future vision for urban logistics or generally logistics sector of, say, by 2050? Where should we move together?
I think in 2050, we will not see any driver-assisted urban mobility, or be it passenger mobility or freight mobility. I do think that we will see automated driving vehicles for freight and passenger transport, and that might, to my view, change the situation. I think we did discuss it, I think in some forum, where the cities will come and regulate the city entrance, as Singapore is already doing that, or London, and telling retailers and manufacturers that they have to share the transport devices, so that which will then run on renewable energy sources, so that we restrict the congestion in the cities we are seeing now, and we of course then restrict the pollution. On the other hand, we will see automated passenger traffic, and there I'm not sure, to be honest, if our current mass transportation systems will stay, or if it will be even more individualized, but running on a kind of blockchain system, so that we see individual transport but not individually driven. I'm very sure that we'll have that all in play in 2050.
Okay, thank you so much, Martina. So as far as I understood, you are saying that actually this transformation change should be coming from the communities, from policies, yes, rather. And then railway would be kind of an integrator among the cities and not within the cities.
Not within, well, there might be some mass passenger transport, and there are some experiments with having shops on rail, and I'm not very convinced that that will stay. Sometimes I think maybe the tracks will be used, right? But it might be a little bit more individualized, because you just approach the tracks, you hop in a vehicle. It's like it's like on a fair, where you embark on vehicles which are running automatically. So you don't need to wait for the train filling the one big vehicle, but you can use the individual ones, using the streets or the rail tracks as ways of transport, with different speed, for example, and heavy transport. So where you calculate in tons and not in parcels, they might stick to a track system, and the high speed transport. Inner city transport, which is not exactly high speed, will be on, I think, autonomous vehicles.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much, Martina. And I acknowledge your flexibility to change your time for us. Sorry for any inconvenience. That was really very important for having you, and that's why we insisted on having you with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoy your weekend. And
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And all the participants, please stay with us. We will go into the group work for shortly. Thank you, Martina.